All the edits you see in that document were generated from the state's comments.
By whom?
Lee Burns.
Tonight?
Lee Burns.
Yes.
Is she somebody with the state?
She's the state. She's a state historic preservation person.
So they specifically inserted those changes. and
Travis,
sent it
is
back
Jim
to
not
us.
coming?
No, they didn't edit the document. They just told us what to do.
Okay.
Hopefully he'll never be on the
Staff wrote the changes.
So
Staff wrote the changes. We met, they got the recommendations and wrote
Here's our-
it.
you
Here are
guys
the
really
recommendations.
haven't had any chance
I like that about
to
him.
discuss them either then? Or have you?
We had one discussion on it, yeah.
He insults me.
You have had discussion on the changes? Because I didn't think they were out until just now.
We discussed it. I don't know if it was an informal.
July 20th.
So you had these changes then?
We had the changes
Okay.
then, and we voted on them.
Okay.
And we met, I don't know if you understood, we met face to face with Lee. We had a meeting, she came to one of our meetings.
Oh, okay.
We met, it was a discussion. She explained to us why all the changes were necessary. Angela took the notes and staff wrote the changes. So
Okay.
it wasn't an email or anything.
Okay. So the state didn't actually write us a letter, it was just that verbal, that she told you what the concerns were when
As
you
far
met
as
with
I
her?
know, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Having said that,
Having said that, I guess the first order of business would be to go through those changes. Angela's going to do that. Hey, Paul. I'm sorry, is that yours or mine?
No, that's good. It's in front of me.
Yeah, the first thing on our agenda would be to go through those changes. So let's go through those one at a time and kind of talk about it and be sure we understand it.
You all right?
Just FYI, the speakers, people can watch, even though it's not amplified, because we have too much feedback, but if you can just be loud, but they can hear it on the internet on this recording. It's just, we don't have it amplified, so,
You were on film?
yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten 3 slices.
I think cameras all the way on George and.
So, good Lord, how much pizza? Patty.
So one of the things we changed was adding several definitions. And just so you know, the definitions either came directly from our existing ordinance or from existing state language, so it's not like anything I made up. First, we have contributing, what types of buildings or structures or whatever would be considered contributing in a, and this applies to the historic district. The next one is, you see, the design review board. That's the definition straight from our ordinance.
Angela, what's the point of inserting that definition here?
Well, at some point, once we have a district, we're going to have to determine, we have to go through all the building structures in the district and determine which ones are contributing versus which ones are
No, I'm
not.
talking about the design review board. Why do we need to define the design review board here?
The design review board is mentioned in the review process, I think, and
Certificate of
DRB,
appropriateness
issue
for
one of those.
non-contributing
I understand,
structures.
but why does the definition need to be in this ordinance? It's already in the definition section of the ordinance. Why do we need to repeat it here?
She felt at the meeting that since the DRB was mentioned later for certificate of appropriateness, that it should be defined up front.
Okay.
So we have historic.
Is this, the reason I ask is this verbatim the way it's in the
Yes.
other part of the ordinance? Because this may not have come up before, but the word "and" is in there. It says it's made of 7 city Milton residents and business owners, which implies that there's got to be at least a business owner on the design review board.
Well, we do have residents and business owners.
But that makes it a requirement instead of an option.
Like and or.
Yeah.
I think it's verbatim, but that's fine.
Well, it's just something to check. I mean, it doesn't affect this, but I didn't realize that that's the way it read in the ordinance. I'm not sure that we want to make it a requirement that it has to have a business owner. Maybe we do.
I had a big question of that, about the definition.
Is it an eligibility thing for membership on that committee that they have to either be a resident or a business owner? And
Yes.
Going to be
Uh-huh.
tied back to that somewhere?
Well, I thought.
I mean, George is right. It reads and. It's
I mean, we just need to check the definition in the bigger document, and if
Actually,
it doesn't say and or, it should,
yeah.
and this one should as well.
We should-
And I-
we should mirror
Chris,
the
I think
city's
to your point,
definition.
I think it has to be a resident, and a business owner that's not a resident is not eligible.
not eligible.
Yeah.
Well,
No, you're
I'm s-
allowed to be a business owner if
Yeah.
you're not a resident.
wasn't the
On the
objective,
design review board?
to include them as interested parties?
Well, that's
Well, that-
another part that
that's
we
been
took out,
eliminated,
but,
Chris.
you are allowed to have a business in the city of Milton even if you're not a resident.
But they eliminated that from the prior version of the ordinance.
So we'll get to that.
Okay, sorry.
But I'll check on that answer. So historic, that's straight from the state. Non-contributing, again, versus contributing, as it refers to the certificate of appropriateness process. Non-historic.
Can I, before you leave
Uh-huh.
this section, I'd like to go back, and I apologize for dragging this down, but it's important. Certificate of appropriateness still carries the idea that a certificate of appropriateness is required in order to make a change in the appearance of a designated historic property or of a property that's not historic. It doesn't differentiate contributing versus non-contributing, but it's still, the way it's defined, says that it applies to a property that's within the designated historic district that is not necessarily historic. Is that really what we mean and want? I mean, this is going to come up later because it's always been one of the arguments or concerns that the Planning Commission has had, is that the requirement for a non-historic property to be subject to that process within a historic district was an issue before.
So would you just
But
insert
it's
contributing
not.
in front of property?
It's
or
not,
you just-
George. The certificate of appropriateness, back, second to last page, if it's a non-contributing property in a district, the VRB makes the decision on any certificate of appropriateness, not the HPC.
Right, but what he's saying is,
What?
right up here, it doesn't define it that way on the front
You
page.
should just say a contributing property located in the designated historic district.
That works?
Yes, so it's-
Yeah.
That
Does
makes
somebody
sense.
want to read the DNR sample that
You
has
have
the
a-
same wording?
There you go, that's where it came from.
Well, I think the confusion on that end would be typically the DNR looks at it and says most cities have their
Design review board do. Preservation Commission duties.
So, yes, that definition is from the model ordinance. Means document evidencing approval by the Historic Preservation Commission of an application to make a material change in the appearance of a designated historic property or of a property located within a designated historic district. So either way, the properties in the district are going to need a certificate of appropriateness, if they're contributing or not. I think, as Mark said, the difference is if they're contributing, the HBC will issue the COA, and if they're non-contributing, the DRB will issue it.
And again, I'm just lifting up, and I don't want to speak for anybody else that's here, but that was an issue for us in the Planning Commission when we looked at this the first time, because we didn't feel that a non-historic property should have to go through that process.
If it's in a historic district, it certainly does.
Well,
It does.
We
I think,
take-
I
we
think,
take
it-
issue
I think
with
this
that.
ordinance disagrees with that later on, though, because it says if it's non-contributing, then it goes to Design Review Board.
Which still has to be reviewed in a district. In a historic district, if there's a modern house in downtown Savannah, and they want to add an addition or something, they have to go through the Savannah Historical Commission, because it's in the historical district.
And everything except single-family homes goes to the DRB anyway.
It's like that in Crested Butte, Colorado, too. It doesn't matter if it's a addition.
So we don't need that word contributing in there. Is that what we're?
I think we leave it like the DNR had, and less trouble if you just follow the basic language from the state.
So then my question is, does the DRB have in its rules and regulations certificate of appropriateness?
Yes.
They do?
Uh-huh.
They must not put that word in there.
But it doesn't apply to residential properties because they don't review them.
That's right. So what about a what about a non-contributing residential property? It's going to go,
Don't know.
it'll have to have the certificate of appropriateness issued by the HPC.
Well, that's not the way this is written.
Well, it is the way it's written, isn't it, George? How's it not the
No,
way?
because non-contributing properties don't go to the HPC.
Well, according to this, any property does.
Any
If
party
it's
in the
a historic
district, any party in the historical district has to have a certificate of appropriateness.
Yes,
If it's a
sir.
contributing property, it comes to the HPC. If it's a non-contributing, a new 7-Eleven downtown Savannah, it goes to the DRB.
Yes, but that's what we're saying, Mark. If it's, we're saying the same thing. The non-contributing property theoretically goes to the DRB. But if it's a residential property, the DRB has no jurisdiction over it. So what do you do with a non-contributing residential property in a historic district? Who reviews that? What do you do with that?
The
They go to the
DRB.
DRB because they don't review.
The DRB doesn't have
The
an authority.
HPC, I'm sorry, the HPC would be the only people who have
Okay, so
purview of
if
that.
that's what we want to do, this needs to reflect that, right? That's all I'm saying.
What I'm saying is, I think it does reflect that, doesn't it?
I don't think so. When you get back to.
Well, if it's non-contributing, then it's not a designated historic property. It could be a property located within a historic district. Do you want to add the word contributing or not? If you leave out the word contributing, yeah, it would come to us, the way I read it. But if you put in the
the way I
word
read it,
contributing,
too.
then it wouldn't. It wouldn't go to anybody.
Let's worry about, get back to the.
To that part?
to the-
So for now, we're not
Certificate
inserting
of
that word
appropriateness.
contributing into the
Right.
COA definition.
I think we need to focus on the state recommended changes first, and then we can come back and talk to the general ordinance if you'd like. Stay on task.
Okay, so Angela, you want to continue?
Contributing, so, okay, historic and non-historic, and then along with contributing, we get non-contributing. And then on page 3, one of the comments that.
Angela, I'm trying to stick with the plan. Help me understand the difference between a non-contributing and a non-historic.
Non-historic is kind of historic versus non-historic. Historic would be kind of the top layer. Non-historic is not even, the HPC would never see it, never review it. It just doesn't meet the criteria for historic. Now, non-contributing comes in with the district. It's in a historic district.
So non-contributing
But it's-
only applies to properties within a district?
Right.
Okay.
But a non-contributing would also be non-historic.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, his non-historic is kind of a higher level.
But so if it's outside of the district, it's just
It would just
non-historic.
be
But if it's in the
non-historic.
district, it's both.
Right.
So when I look at the definition for non-historic, it says it doesn't meet the criteria for local landmark designation. What does that mean?
The local landmark designation is the official city designation of being historic.
Do we have a definition for that?
Local landmark?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Do we need that?
I mean, if we're using historic as the
What I would
guideline,
probably do is just switch out landmark for historic.
that works.
That's a good idea.
Any questions on page 2? Page 3. One of the comments that Lee Burns from the State Department of Natural Resources made was that she felt she wasn't used to a board of this size for a city of this size. And she suggested that we reduce the number of board members Obviously, we kept the 7 members, each one appointed by a city council member, but we took out the 2 ex officio members to bring the numbers down.
What's the difference?
Ex officio members were kind of.
No, I know what ex officio is, but why would they care how many members there were?
It's just, well, the more people you have, the more complicated things can get. She just said she wasn't used to a board of this size.
Isn't that our choice?
I think it is our choice. It's just a suggestion from her. If you feel strongly that they need to be there, I don't think she will reject it because we have ex officio members on there.
I gathered her thoughts on the 2 ex officios that we'd appoint. She's like, why would you need to appoint somebody? You could just use them as a resource anyway.
As needed.
Right.
We had
That's
that.
what
We
it
had
was.
that conversation
Right.
originally, though, right?
Yeah.
And remember?
It was just
It's
for us,
been
we
years.
wanted to have the ability to bring people on for, like, during projects or whatnot, just as resources, but we could use them as resources without having to designate them as ex officio members.
Well,
And Lee said also that it stresses staff to have a huge number of people. She said most of the commissions that she deals with have about 3 people.
You see, Angela's already got a band job, having to type on it.
All that swinging she has to do. I mean, I remember that conversation. We thought it was to the benefit of your board to, in a quasi-official capacity, to have the opportunity to seek qualified input where that expertise may not be
Keep people
available.
engaged.
Well, I thought it was a good idea to have somebody from the design review board on there, because it's going to be similar stuff we're reviewing. But we did have somebody volunteer. They, as far as I'm aware, they've never been to any of our meetings. I like the idea of it, just to give us that background. I don't see why the state should care. It's honestly, in my opinion, none of their business.
Yeah, that's kind of.
It's not a voting member. It's somebody to assist us with references.
You guys are looking for the ability to put a qualified individual into your decision-making process on something that's outside of your realm of comfort. And you want them to have a designation that's qualified by this. What the heck does the state have to weigh in for? It's something that we're choosing to manage within our staff and our committee. So in response, if we choose to leave it there, what's the state going to say? It was just a suggestion, and they're not going to be offended, or they're going to be offended because we chose to leave it in. And what difference does it make if they are or aren't offended?
I mean, I think we need to look at this as these comments from the state. Do they improve our ordinance? If they do, then let's accept them. If they don't improve our ordinance, then I don't think we have to accept them.
well, that's a good point, Tom. Maybe we ought to understand, what was the context of these comments? Were they intended to be suggestions for improving the ordinance, or were they intended to be?
Well, I think they were both. I think there's some things in here that were deal killers. I think that historic,
Define what a deal killer means, though.
Yeah, explain that.
that the state would not approve it or bless it. I don't know if they approve it. They don't ever do.
Certify it.
There's no official action of approval on it, but I think that would prevent us from having, what's the designation that we would have?
Certified local government, I believe.
Certified local government status, which might qualify us for some grants. I don't think there is any grant money today, but perhaps in the future there will be.
Okay. Did they distinguish those things that fall in that category versus the things that were just suggestions?
I think they practically wanted us to take their ordinance and do a find and replace on the state of Georgia with the city of Milton. I think that's really what
There's
they
a
wanted.
model, a state model ordinance, and they don't want you to get much.
I know other cities don't follow the state ordinance letter to letter. They have other changes in it that are specific to their cities, and I think if their suggestions improve our document, we should consider them. I think there's a couple of things in here which would probably be deal killers if we didn't accept, but I personally think that they improve our document, and we'll get to those one at a time.
Well,
So-
can we distinguish between suggestions and mandates or whatever?
She was fairly
I
concise.
don't know that we can with certainty because she didn't report them that way.
Yeah.
But these are critical and these
Be a
are
judgment call.
suggestions. So I
She was-
think we-
She did say that the historic zoning was not legal.
That's right, I understand
Right,
that.
and so that was a deal killer, right
That
there.
would be the only one that I know of that's probably the deal killer, but,
Yeah, she said it wasn't in her purview. It shouldn't be in our ordinance.
and we'll get to
Say
that
again,
in a
perhaps?
minute.
she said historic zoning, because it was kind of in here like it would be like under our task. She didn't want that in the ordinance at all. So that's not something,
Yeah,
that
but
the
let's-
Historic
so-
Preservation Commission should not be involved in making zoning decisions.
She said
Okay, so let-
it implied future use, is what she said. Those were her
Yeah, but
exact
let's make sure we're talking the same thing here. Is she saying it shouldn't be part of the ordinance that creates the commission, or it shouldn't be part of the zoning ordinance?
She should be part of our
HPC.
The HPO.
Her point is that we need to separate preservation from land use.
She
And
she
I
was
couldn't
pretty
agree with her more.
concise in the meeting, and there were some heavy deal killers, yes, but most of what she recommended moderately strongly that these need to be in the ordinance. The ex officio thing doesn't matter one way or the other. We can have 2 ex officio, and if we don't, they're going to come anyway and be part of it. I mean, it's the truth. The only thing I want to say is every time in 3 years that we've forked away from the DNR language, we've ended up paying a price for it 3 years later. So I just want to throw that out there. And you guys know we've met with you guys a bunch now. So every time we got creative, we paid a price.
And she is the coordinator for the certified local government at the state level.
Maybe she'll move.
So, you know, if we're at all interested, that's why we're doing the HPC to begin with, is to comply with certified local government. So she's the, she's the person who stamps it.
I mean, do we need to have somebody recommend that we leave this language in, that we take this language out? How are we going to proceed on this?
What does the HPC want?
I say we just leave it as it's written.
Leave it in.
I'm a pretty strong opinion. I mean, this is how it's been written up, and this is what she wanted, and she came down to visit us from downtown, and I say go with what she said. She's from the DNR.
You want to knock it out?
Yeah.
Wow.
I want to, as the change as written, the red language is written.
As it's been amended here,
As it's been amended, yeah.
meaning that the ex officio is out.
Yeah.
The HPC is already approved, so.
The HBC has already approved the changes?
Yes.
So
That's what you guys
that
said.
helps
Looked
a
at it a
lot.
couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the whole 2 ex officio, what do you do? If we need to use somebody's resource, we'll pick up the phone and call them anyway.
I'm not a reason.
I don't do that. I would like, I like that idea.
oh, I'm chocolate chip.
Here, Tom.
I should have done it at the last meeting. No, we've already
Sorry,
approved it.
I missed the point.
So that
you
giving
have
people
5 votes.
a
Oh,
responsibility
actually, we
in
only
the
need
community
four. Angela
to,
said four.
I can think of all
My
kinds of
bylaw
reasons
says
to
5.
do that, but we can give them another title.
Yeah.
Or just have them work on something like this. Or
Can I-
society or
We have Ken, Norm, Mark.
Can we get back together? I want to make sure I understand what you just said. So you guys had a meeting with her. This came out subsequent to, you guys got it on the 20th of July, and you've had a meeting since then to review this as
In
a
August.
committee? Okay. And the committee voted to approve what was here. Okay.
So that's good information. So now we need to look at this as in terms of what the PC feels about these changes.
Well, this is HPC's recommendation to the planning commission.
Okay.
Right?
That gives me a different.
Yeah, it does give you a different frame of mind.
Okay.
I was reading this trying to defend you guys. You've already approved it.
What kind of an idiot would recommend something like this?
A big one.
It's completely
I
unacceptable.
wasn't at that meeting.
Okay,
it was
let's keep
unanimous.
going.
Okay.
Let's go.
So before that, that was just within the city limits of City of Milton. That was just to clarify who can appoint who. It's Page 3, paragraph B. And then at the bottom of the page, that's our first reference to the H historic zoning designation. And as Travis and Mark said, that was pretty much a deal killer. Make it short and sweet, she said, the HPC should be about preserving, the structure, and they should have nothing to do with the use. That's zoning, there should be separate, and she was pretty clear about that. So I don't know if this, but just so you know, to kind of balance that out, we have put together an H, on an H1 zoning district for the zoning ordinance, which we'll look at later. So it'll still be covered, just not in the historic preservation ordinance. Questions about page 3? Page 4, number 14, she really wanted to put in, wanted us to have strong language about retaining people with whatever expertise for, you know, whatever project that we'll be working on in the future. I think we had some language in there, like, you know, we may contact these people subject to funding and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, but you will need these people, so you need to make this a strong point. And that's, so she didn't give me any suggested language. That's what I came up with.
You talking about in 14?
Number 14 on page 4, yes.
The word retain was in the ordinance before. That's not in the word.
I think I moved it around.
It was in the same place.
Okay.
Actually, what that struck me as well, because here the ex officios are coming out. Here they're talking about a retained person. It's like, well, if you could have retained the person as a ex officio, why retained to me also implies cost.
Well, yeah, that's the point. We may at some point have to pay an expert to do whatever, as opposed to somebody that's volunteering their time on the board.
So as would be the case of larger government, they want you to pay for that service, where we might have gotten it as an ex officio volunteer.
Well, maybe somebody from out of the community. You know.
But the ex officio didn't require it.
Well, I think they had to be. Didn't they have to be still a resident or business owner of the
Nope.
city?
Nope, that's why we put them in there. So they could get the expertise without having to be limited to the city or...
Yeah.
This
kinda
change
goes-
just empowers them. It doesn't.
Right.
I mean, anybody who would come and provide you information as a volunteer would do it either as an ex officio member or if you just call them and ask them. Right?
Right.
Yeah, don't prevent
So
somebody from volunteering
14
their
is a
time.
Right.
harmless paragraph.
Right.
She just wanted stronger language.
It's harmless.
Can somebody pass the oatmeal cookies?
Well, oatmeal, don't be messing with the chocolate chip. These can go.
Robin really splurged on the cookies. All right, go on, Angela.
I think
Okay.
4 pieces of pizza and 2 cookies are
One of the other things that I think was also kind of a deal killer, historic designation versus historic site of interest. Milton has a lot of sites, structures, or whatever that, under the current rules and regulations, they wouldn't necessarily meet the criteria to be determined as historic. It may be a crossroads, it may be the site of a former school where there's nothing there, but the city still wants to recognize that in some way. We didn't feel that was the role of the city's Historic Preservation Commission, so that's why we took out number 18.
The role of the HPC, and Lee Burns clarified this for us, we should have figured it, as I apologize to our commission, I should have known this 3 years ago. The role is to preserve structures that are standing,
Here.
four walls and just four
A roof.
walls and a roof. And we were going forward with historic signage, you know, recognizing what used to be here, a Civil War site. That's not our role. It's not the role of the commission. It's the role of the Historical Society, of which some people are now trying to form. And that's what this is being erased.
She said what's here.
But it's not just 4 walls and a roof, right? It's other.
Well, it's defined in here, but she said, you know, pretty much when you designate something historic, it can't just be a vacant lot where someone lived 200 years ago. There has to be a structure there, and, you know, generally define it as
Well, I
4
was-
walls and a roof.
Just as an example, and forgive me if this is getting off track, but I was clearing some brush over at my house, and the guy that I bought the property from told me that Birmingham Highway used to run across the front of my property, and I got this old barn that's right on the edge of it, and I found this big stone bridge that across which Birmingham Highway ran in the brush. I mean, I didn't even know it was there. I walked past it 1,000 times, and I thought, that's pretty darn cool. Big stone, I mean, as high as the ceiling and long, and yeah. Anyway, I mean, I would think something like that would be historically important. I don't know how old it is, but it's pre-1900 for sure, because it's followed.
structure.
Pardon?
That's a structure.
Okay, but the 4 walls and a roof thing is what
She was just saying
got
that
my
as an example
attention.
compared to, like, say, the old Hagen store, which is like no roof and
No
3
roof.
walls.
A half.
That's a
Like
ruin.
even
That's a
battlefield.
ruin.
Half a wall.
Mark, so a battlefield wouldn't qualify?
It qualifies for a historical society to
Society.
put up a sign that says Sherman came here and kicked our butts. But it doesn't qualify.
That never happened.
It never did. But anyway, but for the historical commission to designate it historic, no. For the society to put the sign up, yes. Now I can't speak to the federal historical register and what they do, but we're speaking about Milton's historical designation underneath how the state does it. So.
Well, Mark, in order to be consistent then, in this, things we're trying to do we need to strike that from the definitions we've put in here?
Strike what?
The idea, for example, historic property, the way it's written here, includes a site. Should that not be there?
I think the state's just got a weak language on it because they don't feel like they have the power to protect anything. I mean, you got battlefields that can be bought up by a developer and just smack a neighborhood in the middle of it. And I think
Yeah,
the
but to
state
Mark's
doesn't have any
point, I
protection on it.
mean, is it
I
supposed
believe
to
the
be
language
within
on
the purview of the-
Angela, help me. The language on historical structure came from the state, did it not?
That's their
So,
definition.
The language on historical structure did.
I mean, I'm sorry that I
Historic
threw some
property.
gray area into the deal here, but I'm just telling you what she said and how she explained it. And really, to Curtis Bridge or similar, the rock formation that Travis talks about, it really comes down to the application process and, gray area making the business, the right decision at the time. But I don't think we should veer away from the DNR language.
So I can, looking
That
at
would
the
be-
state's,
I'm sorry, Angela. Go ahead.
looking at the state's definition, I think the difference between the historical site versus an, empty lot, something actually happened, a significant event, occupation, activity, or whatever was on this site, versus a building that's no longer there. So the site itself has to have some historical significance.
The real purpose of the conversation was the commission does not put up the signs that says Tamachichi walked by.
Okay.
That's not the purpose of the commission.
And you guys are okay with it? I gather that because you've accepted the land.
That was one of the deal killer languages right there.
It's just inconsistent with what I thought was going to be a really valuable asset of the creation of the community that you guys are. And it's almost like they're watering down what would have been a great authority that you guys would have had.
Paul, I think at the beginning we didn't quite understand what the commission was supposed to do. Because I thought, signage would be probably one of our biggest deals on certain corners. And, that wasn't under the purview of the commission. It's the Historical Society. And there's people that want to form one here in the city, and they'll take that on.
Do you have the state copy?
So it was just not the commission, Tom.
I'm just having a hard time in the last 20 minutes
From their basement?
accepting such a watered-down version of what I thought was going to be a...
She was very
Not that
clear.
it's going to dismantle what you guys value, you guys bring, but it just I'm struggling with the fact that it's more uniform than,
We struggled with it.
yeah, I imagine.
We had a list of signs. We were
I mean, there are other ways
ready to
deal
go.
with historic markers as well. A historic marker is simply a sign application. If the city council chose to put up a historic marker on some historic position, place, all they would have to do was initiate a sign application.
I think their own ordinance argues exactly with what she said.
Why?
Coach, so she says it has to be 4 walls and a roof, right? I'm just saying, her argument conflicts with her own flippant ordinance.
That's the state. model
I'm not a
ordinance, you
big
know.
Lee Burns fan, so you'll have to excuse me. I mean, it has site in there, everything. It has building, like standing, demolished, vanished. So the building didn't even still have to be there, and that's the state model. She wants us to follow the stupid state model so much.
Were there any other questions about page 4? Page 5, A2. Again, that was taking out another reference to the H zoning. Page 7, more references to historic zoning. That's all of that on page 7.
Angela, since all of D was taken out, I didn't notice this, but we need to drop E.
Right, once we take it out, it'll renumber.
It'll renumber.
Right. So make sure everybody saw what was there. Page 9, 12, in the green on page 12.
Oh, go back to page 9. I jumped ahead too far. We can talk about it when we get to the planning commission meeting, or we can talk about it tonight. But if I look at section A at the top of that page, this is what I was talking about before. This says approval of material change in appearance involving historic properties. That's the title. But then it says after the designation of a property or district, so it's broader than just properties, no material change in the appearance of the property or of a contributing or non-contributing building shall be permitted without the, made by the owner or occupant thereof unless or until the application approval of certificate of appropriateness. So if you have a non-contributing property in a historic district, you are not allowed to do anything to your property without getting a certificate of appropriateness, is what that says. Okay, and then that, personally, that's probably the single biggest thing that I objected to before, and I think the commission as a whole objected to before.
Because you go back to the whole residential, it's non-contributing, it's a residence.
Right.
Who reviews it?
No, the issue is not who reviews it. The issue is imposing those conditions on somebody that is not a historic property, had nothing to say about whether they were included in a historical district, and now they're having to go through a process if they want to do something with their home.
Well, it
That
does,
defeats the whole purpose of having
Right.
a historical district. And I'm going to use Savannah since I'm from Savannah, but if you had a non-contributing property at Brick Ranch on East 48th Street, where I grew up, and you wanted to tear it down and build a contemporary, what you were saying is they can do whatever they want. Well, the historic district in Daffodil Heights, you have to go see them, and then you have to build a house that meets the architectural style of the neighborhood.
So you're saying non-contributing should go to...
Non-contributing has to have approval, and if you're going to tear the roof off and build an addition, you have to get approval
Well,
from the
let me point out, because I was okay when I started down this road, because if you go back to the definition of non-contributing, it says such properties are subject only to the provisions of this chapter regarding new construction, including general landscape character, blah, 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 only when the amount of the construction equals or exceeds 25% of the land area or building. That to me made sense, right? But the way this is written here, if I want to paint my house, I've got to have approval to do that.
we don't,
Or at a
I thought it was that
or
simple.
rename the driveway.
Oh, yeah, anything, anything. Anything that's
I
deemed a
mean, I think
material.
it's treating all structures in a historic district like we treat commercial properties. I mean, it's requiring that review like we would require a review of a commercial property.
If I have a commercial property and I want to change the bushes out in front of my property, I have to come and get approval to do that?
well, not for bushes,
Probably
but
not for bushes.
If
You want your material change, you do.
And there's a definition for material change, is that, yeah.
material change and percentage and all of that. That's stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not, all I'm saying is, I mean, that's continues to be my objection.
Yeah, it's
It's
comes
imposing.
with a lot of
it's-
regulations. in
I mean,
a
you know,
district.
with all due respect to Mark, Savannah and Milton aren't the same, right? I mean, I have trouble thinking of an historic district in Milton where this is going to be a problem, because I can't think of a district where you're going to have more than a single property, other than signage, right, where you're going to designate it as an historic district, and it's going to become an issue. But nonetheless, it does.
What are you concerned about,
Yeah,
like property rights or?
Is this something that works with grandfathering? I don't understand the property right issue, but if they're already there and this is imposed,
Well, it's irrelevant,
Doesn't
because there's
matter.
never going to be,
There's no
be a couple
grandfather.
hundred more years before they could designate something newer than it, right? I mean, there's
Right.
only 2 or 3 potential districts in the
A district can
Right.
be drawn to.
city.
A district can be drawn around those properties to prevent that from happening. I mean,
Say again?
if we started to create a district tonight and we said, okay, we've got resident that's 20 years old, historic building, you could literally take the district, you know.
Well, why bother
Wow.
having
History.
the rule then? I mean, if you're
That's what
going
we
to
try to do, is take the
gerrymander
district
it.
out altogether and just make it a property-specific designation. I mean, that's what we tried to do before when we
Right.
looked at it.
I mean, I got mixed feelings about
That
I
was
can
almost
see
a deal
that.
breaker with the state, because the
You
state
know?
looks at their ordinance as a district ordinance.
It's a district thing.
Huh?
Yeah.
Crab apple.
She said she only has one or
Yeah,
just a
crab
handful of properties that have just one property. They are used to 99% dealing with districts.
I tried to explain to her that Milton's different. I was like, we haven't been here 200 years. We're a city created out of properties. We're not a district with the city surrounding us. We just don't have that downtown type district. It's
I think you can create
Yeah,
a
you
pretty
have to customize
tight
it.
district
You can't
in
just
Crab
put
Apple.
one size
I was
fits
just
all.
going to say, I don't know what you all are
You can
thinking, but I'm
create
like in a different
district
world
that's
here.
that includes probably a dozen or
That's correct.
a dozen homes, and then have outside that district specific properties
Mm-hmm.
designated.
You can, but it would also be very easy to create that so that it included some non-contributing properties within the district.
Yeah, if you take Crabapple and Lou Oliver put his plan into place, you would have a mix of contributing and non-contributing buildings within what would be likely to have been defined as a district over there. So it was with some of those things in mind that I was measuring that, like George is measuring it. So you've got a Lou Oliver bungalow that's built next to the Statham building. You know, should they have to conform or not? I guess that's the debate.
I think that's considerations when you get ready to create your district. If that's the
Yeah,
conversation
what I'm
you'll have
saying
at
is,
that
say if they
time.
built right next to it, then you could end the district at the Statham building, and the next door is outside.
It's ultimately a
I see what
city.
you're saying, though. Like,
Yeah.
say if somebody took some stuff and put on Alphabet, I mean, it depends.
I mean, it's all nuance. I mean,
Is
if you
there
had
ever a
said It's
circle
going to
where
be
it's
X, Y,
something
and
in the
Z
middle?
roads defining it, then it's inclusive of some of those properties.
Right.
And then you build a Lou Oliver building within it, then you haven't already drawn it like you've drawn, Travis, and your drawing, your suggestion makes more sense to me than the way I was thinking about it before.
Because you're thinking, this is a
Yeah.
district, this happens to be a house in
It's
it.
defined by.
I'm thinking,
You know,
Right.
the middle school, and it's defined by where the church is, and by X, Y, and Z, those are the boundaries, and within that area.
right.
If you're doing it parcel by parcel, it gets easier.
It is, but you might lose something. I mean, I don't know. You have to consider that.
Well, I was just
whenever
thinking,
actually
because
get-
if
get
you look
around
at,
to it. You might lose something by not having a district.
Well, I'm just thinking the
Especially
way
when
you
the
define
houses are-
districts. Because
Paul,
you
Paul,
look
it's
at all
all-
roads and-
Paul, it's ultimately the city council's decision on when the proposal goes to council to elect to have a district or not. Those questions get brought up, and they'll decide, I don't know if it's worth the hassle, or yeah, we do want the district, and they're the elected officials.
As a practical matter, though, there is a hole in here, right, with respect
Yeah.
to residential property, so we've got to figure out how to close it. We're going to leave this here, right?
Can you say the whole?
Well, the way this is written, it says that if it's a non-contributing property, that it's subject to review by the DRB, and the DRB doesn't have jurisdiction over residential properties. So if it's a non-contributing commercial
I
property,
mean, I
this
don't know
works.
why you even have to say DRB, because it's going to go to the DRB anyway if it's a commercial property, and if we just substitute HPC there, then we don't have that. I mean, that would close the hole.
Well, if it's a contributing
confused.
commercial, it would come to us.
Wait. Question. DRB.
Tom, I think that, I agree with that. That's,
I mean, it's
Makes it
okay for a
easy.
property to go to both.
Is it typical, because I'm thinking of another state where the DRBs are just for, it doesn't include residential?
Not here. Some
not
places
here.
it does, but not here.
Single
But
family
it's strict
residential.
locate, like people that are really on their community, you know, I'm thinking, don't they have where they look at residential as well as businesses? Design review boards typically? Like, I don't know what Savannah does in places that have.
I mean, I think it goes both
something-
ways. It
It
goes
does.
both ways.
Just depends on what,
I mean, it's,
so there's, that's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, right?
Well, what was contemplated when the
Yeah.
DRB was created for the city of Milton was the size of that responsibility if it was residential with the development that we were likely at the time
Mm-hmm.
to experience as a city. It would have been overwhelming.
Right.
That would have been a full-time job 7 days a week. That's not the case anymore with the current economic environment, but that was part of the rationale behind it.
Are you just talking about whether it goes to the DRB? I didn't mean to talk over you.
No.
Are you done? Just being
I
respectful.
always
You know me.
would defer to you.
Was it just about the DRB? Because the historic district over in Roswell has mixed commercial and residential, and those overlay requirements are, sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the word. They apply to every structure.
But who's the
And
measure of it?
pardon?
Who's the governing body when there's a request like this that we're talking about?
That I don't know. That's why I was trying to figure out if he was talking about the DRB.
Tom, I think in answer to your question, though, it's more than just a DRB versus HPC. The way this was written before, if it's a non-contributing structure, it has to go through a public hearing. If it's a contributing structure, it just goes to the HPC.
When
That's a
would
public hearing, is it not?
Mhm.
Well, it would be a public hearing. It would.
I mean, why
It's
wouldn't
an
it be a
open
public
meeting,
hearing?
but it's not a public hearing.
What non-contributing structure would have to have a public hearing?
Well, either
The
we
way
change.
this is written, if it's a non-contributing structure in an historic district, it has to go to the DRB and through a public hearing.
Right. So it's the same process, but the public hearing would be in front of the HBC if it was contributing.
Are you saying HPC meetings are not public hearings?
No, they're open,
Open meetings.
They're open meetings, they're not public hearings. They're not defined as a hearing, they're meetings. That's a Ken issue, but I mean, the reason that the non-contributing was going to the DRB was to force it through that other process, that's all. And it works if it's commercial.
So that's on page 7.
That was 9.
8.
Top of page 9.
And if you note on the bottom of page 8, change the day, the number of days for the resolution from 30 to 45, and that was just directly from the state. Other questions that far? There we go all the way to page 12.
Did we solve that issue, though?
I haven't heard back from,
No, well, let's don't leave it to the
Well, yeah, let's, either we put HPC in there, makes the decision on residential and non-contributing, or we change the mandate or whatever, the ordinance for the design review board to review residential. One or the other.
Well, I think the easiest thing would be to change the DRB to allow them to review residential when they're non-contributing in a historic district, but limit it to that.
That's where
To
it should
Paul's
be.
point, so they don't review all residential.
Okay, so leave it as written,
Yeah.
leave it as amended,
Right.
and we're going to change the bylaws for the DRB or whatever the terminology is.
It'll have to be a text amendment.
Right.
Another text amendment.
Did they-
But just limit the residential.
And if it's
to
residential, it would
non-contributing.
never go to DRB anyway.
Well, that's what we're saying, right? So we're going to have to say that
We'll have
if it's
to
a
say
residential,
non-contributing.
non-contributing in a historic district, then it would go to DRB.
But we also, I think,
That fixes it.
we need to say single family because they still
Right.
review
Right.
townhouses,
Multifamily,
multifamily.
Right.
Do they review single family and overlays at all? Not at
No.
just
But
period.
the
Well, I mean,
HPC
technically,
ordinance
we don't
stays as
even need
written,
to define
as
that.
amended.
All we need to do is say the DRB
That's all I need to know.
is going to review any non-contributing use in a historic district.
Can you define an example? Let's pretend Crabapple was a historic district.
Well, let's take
Well, that's what
Thompson,
happened to
let's
it.
take Thompson,
Pardon?
the store on
There's a
Thompson
dome in
Road.
there right now.
Let's take the store on Thompson Road and say that for whatever reason, we need to find the whole four corners there as a
All right.
resident, as a historic district.
All right.
The house behind Thompson's store is my view,
Brick layers.
non-contributing.
Again,
Okay,
It's a tear down.
non-contributing. So the way this is written, we wouldn't have any way to know who gets to review that if it's part of the district, if they want to do something to change that.
Change, any kind of
Material change.
Material change.
Right.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
Now, maybe I'm missing something here, but I think if it's in the historic district, it should be reviewed by the HPC,
Even if it's non-contributing?
even if it's non-contributing.
I'm not arguing,
Let's, I
The
mean,
way this
doesn't
is
everybody
written-
feel
the way-
that way?
the way
In
this
your
is-
district, we're protecting the integrity of that
Or
district.
we could be done by both, right?
On two
Design
parallel
review.
tracks here.
Could be
We're-
done
We're
by
both saying things that
No
are
reason
important. You're absolutely right.
I don't know why they're
George
going
is
this way.
saying
It
also
seems harder
absolutely
to me.
right.
I'm going to
There are
make that.
parallel paths.
Maybe it ought to get a higher level.
You're right, because you're saying, because it's a district, HPC should have the right.
It ought to be easier for the HPC to look at it than to change the ordinance for the DRB.
Absolutely. George is saying.
HPC wants that power.
Non-contributing.
They want it. They want it.
Residential.
They don't want,
36th Street, 48th Street.
Single family.
they don't want the zoning guys changing this work stuff. And in Savannah, they do have it.
It's part of the DRB. And right now, with the way the DRB is written, they can't see it.
That's right.
So if
Wouldn't it-
you make, so to your point, Lee, this is written. It can go, or it has to be, it can be reviewed by the HPC. Separate and apart from this document, we go amend the DRB bylaws?
I'm not being
Bylaws, probably.
Text amendment to the DRB to add, they have the responsibility to review non-conforming, single-family residential in historic districts.
just non-contributory,
Or non-
period.
or not-
Why do we want them to review non-contributing single-family structures in the historic district?
Well, they review any non-contributing building in the historic district now.
There are no
Except
historic.
for,
Single-family residential.
right.
So
That's the way
fixes that
that's the way
single-family
this is written.
residential.
That's the hole you're trying to.
The way this is written is the DRB reviews anything that's non-contributory.
Wouldn't
So
it
we're
be
gonna change
easier?
that and put HPC in this, right?
No, we're saying read that, we're going to
Tom.
expand the
So
scope
close.
of the DRB.
Tom, wouldn't it be easier for the HPC to review the non-contributing than it is to go change the DRB's bylaws?
But it's not bylaws.
Whatever the
I
term
mean, I
is.
want y'all to have whatever you want, but it seems to me that a non-contributing inside a historic district should be the purview of this, of the
Right.
HPC.
I agree.
We're contradicting ourselves, right?
I don't know if we are or not.
Well, we're either going to look at the red language and decide whether we like it or not, or we're going to tear the ordinance apart, right? You're proposing to change the ordinance where it's not red.
That's correct. So that's what
So
I'm
do we want to
proposing.
go back to the beginning and talk about all the places we want to change the ordinance where it's not
At
red?
the end of the agenda, George. We could bring that up as an open item at the end.
I was trying to accommodate what you asked.
I don't know.
Well, we were really close on it, because what you were saying is absolutely correct.
But you've already
But so-
agreed
but
that
so
the
is what
DRB
George
is going to
saying,
review those.
absolutely correct. And they can coexist by changing the DRB ordinance
Yeah,
with a
it's
text
over there.
amendment saying
It's over there, perfect,
that
yeah.
you're only adding that they would have the responsibility to review in a historic district only, a non-contributing, single-family residence.
Who sets the
But why
design
wouldn't we
standards
want
for
that?
those non-contributing
Non-contributing
structures?
single-family
They for
residents
the
to be
overlay.
reviewed by HPC.
They would.
So they'll be
What if
reviewed
Right
by
now,
both.
staff reviews
They'll be
that.
reviewed
What if
by
it's not
both.
in one of the three
Problem
items?
solved.
Right.
There, it's something's.
Yeah,
Just one percent.
Everything has to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
In one or another.
Yeah, so we,
You say overlay, I'm thinking Crabapple, Birmingham, and Highway.
Right.
Right.
And then
But
there's
in order to make
Northwest,
that
which
work,
covers everything else.
leaving this
Overlap
intact,
every single piece
the
of
way it
property.
is currently written.
Everything's
Right now,
on
this is
overlay.
contradictory to what the DRB is allowed to do.
And right now, staff is.
Correct.
Not to change the DRB.
What y'all
But is it
think
written, does
policy
it say that a
area
single-family
values do?
non-contributing in a historic district is reviewed by HPC?
No.
It doesn't
board.
say it, so we
Nobody
gotta add
reviewed
that.
No.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, I know what you're talking about. I've got the maps. Northwest-
Make what
yeah,
work?
I got you.
What you and I have both been saying.
No.
Nobody's left out.
Let's go back and see what it says.
I think
No,
it's easier
you
for
need
the
to leave it the
HPC
way
to
it
approve
is.
it myself. What do you think, Angela?
Well, that Makes
I mean,
It
all
sense
this
says
right
it's
here.
a certificate of appropriateness for material
non-contributing
changes in
building,
historic
blah, blah, blah,
properties and
blah.
material changes
I
contributing
think
considered by the
this is just
DRB
the way
shall
it's
be
set
issued
up
by
that
the HPC.
by the
That's
state.
it. That's all we're talking about.
Non-contributing properties.
If they wanna
the
get
district.
rid of
Certificate of
all that,
appropriate
exactly.
non-contributing buildings
No offense to
shall be
Lee, but she
considered by the
contradicts
DRB
herself.
after
Shall
public
be
hearing and
considered by the
otherwise.
HPC, but there is no public
That her
hearing
own
otherwise than a
We're already
board.
past that. We're already past that. I'm still aggravated with her right now.
So it's written okay, as long as
As,
we change
as
the
written,
DRB.
as written, the HPC has nothing to do with non-contributory properties in a historic district. That's the way it's written now.
That's correct.
And if you guys do want to do that, then you need to modify
Right.
section A in page 9.
And the definition.
Tavis, you asked a good question that I don't think anybody heard though. What design guidelines does the HPC go by?
Well, that's what we were saying.
We've
More
got
likely,
something
our
right.
I'm sorry?
historic district would probably be Crabapple. But say if you did go with the Hopewell and say these four corners of Hopewell and Thompson, what overlay is that on and saying the north?
Well, no, I mean, even if you say Crabapple, what design guidelines does the HPC go by that's different than the DRB?
Well, there will be
You've got to adopt your own design guidelines with HPC.
historic design guidelines.
Would that blanket the city or vary by area?
It'll just be for historic properties in historic district.
But it would be, let's say there were three, they'd all, three in different
They
overlay.
they could have different design guidelines.
Yeah.
And probably should have.
Unique
design
for each
guidelines.
district?
Absolutely.
I'll be darned.
And you may even have one unique for a single building,
Wow.
if the buildings are that different.
They can't hold a
And
public
I
hearing,
actually have a set of design guidelines tonight that I want to
but they can.
give.
I want to go home, George.
As a starter.
Because this says
George, I think it's easier for the
That's me. I'd love to
HPC than it
see
is to change the DRB
if they don't
We'll
have
get to
the
that.
bylines, whatever you want to call it.
So we want.
I don't think it's really ever going to be an issue, but that's whatever. I'm going to refer to all the lawyers in the room.
Well, I mean, if you're really referring to all the lawyers, I think this paragraph's going to be problematic no matter how we do it, because you're taking property rights away from people that had no say in that.
What if they were voluntary?
I'm sorry?
What if you put something in there that made it, that they're suggested guidelines?
That works.
And that way,
Well, the
But that's not-
guidelines are voluntary by right anyway.
So
They
why
are
would
What
they-
guidelines?
our proposed.
The guidelines that
historic-
we will
Oh,
eventually
yeah,
adopt.
but the requirement that they have to get a
Certificate of
certificate of
Well,
appropriateness is not
that's pretty
voluntary.
much,
That's
right,
the
that's
issue.
pretty much fundamental of the HPC.
So what do you want to do? HPC approves of non-contributory or
I don't care.
DRB?
I just was trying to make it work. I don't care.
Okay, let's,
George is trying
well,
to
I got a
close the hole.
committee
Okay,
here. so-
well, okay.
Yeah, quick sidebar.
Okay, this
See what-
is- this
see
is
what
what
you
I'm
want
worried
to
about.
You
do.
can talk
How
out
do
loud.
you, no, I know. I feel like I need to ask you guys, how do you protect, and I want to protect people's property rights. Let's take, I look at where I came from in LA. What if you have this beautiful area and somebody puts in, goes right to the edge of the property with a big modern mansion? Who,
Are you talking about something that comes
In
in after the
Crabapple.
fact?
Mhm.
That's different. But you're not taking anybody's property rights away if they come into a historic district after the fact. Because they're
You know
coming
they're
in
doing
with
it.
their eyes
For the
open. I'm talking
existing
about if these
non-contributing
two had historic
voluntary.
properties on either side of yours and yours was
can't
2 years
force
old, and
No, you can't.
and a district is
Milton
defined to
runs it,
include
yeah.
all three of you,
right,
you
Right,
can't
yeah,
materially
that's
change your
why-
property without
Right,
going
okay,
through this process, even though you're not historic.
okay.
at all.
So it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't restrict your property rights. It puts a burden on your property rights. You
Well,
have
it
to
could
come
restrict your
before.
property rights.
Well, you
It's,
could, but
right.
you could still appeal that, but still.
It's similar to an HOA
It's
reviewing
exactly-
a new debt,
Exactly.
I don't.
which George had approved mine.
So you have a
Yeah.
public hearing.
3 months later.
That's a good analogy. It's just, like you said, it's like an
The
architectural
property owner
review
doesn't,
board.
the property
Couldn't
owner
get a
doesn't
quorum,
have any
right?
right
Just
there, it's
built
up
it.
to the city council to
Exactly.
decide, right?
That's right, it's
worry
up to
about
the
it.
elected officials
Yeah.
to figure out if this is for
Yeah,
the
it's actually
better
6
good,
months.
for the bigger good, and
Right.
it's a difficult thing to create a historic district,
This-
especially if it
the whole purpose of the
includes
district is to be able to control the
non-contributing property.
architecture.
Even if it does,
and
even if
improve-
it's entirely
That's what
contributing
we're saying in
properties,
Savannah, is you got
it's still very
historic
difficult to do it
houses,
because
somebody
it
built
comes
something
along with a lot of
falling down.
regulations and a lot of costs.
They're
You
going
don't
to
want
make
somebody building
you.
for sure.
Have you
Yeah,
seen
they're
that,
not going to
Don?
allow
It's
that.
about controlling
A
the,
historic
I have never
district
seen one created.
Yeah.
I've worked in Roswell for a long time where they have a very nice historic district and commission, but I can only imagine how hard it was to
But
create it.
let's talk about Roswell. Is Roswell a district in this sense, or is Roswell in the district in the sense that there's a sign when you enter that area that says you're entering historic
it's a
No,
property
no, no, it's
defined
got a
specific
defined, it's
district.
got a
Official
defined
historic
limits
district.
to a historic district.
with controls on?
with
Yes.
controls
Yeah,
on it, including both historic and, contributing and non-contributing properties.
Signed ordinance
pretty
varies
strict.
from the standard. I mean, there are all kinds of unique.
Well, Patty and Veronica, Jonah, y'all okay with the HPC approving changes to the non-contributors?
Yes.
Okay. Are you okay?
Speak up, Gary.
Yeah.
Okay, we solved that one.
All right.
Keep moving.
Striking out a certificate at the bottom of section A. All right, on page 12 in the green, we submitted this to the city attorney just to clarify that we really want chapter 12 because we weren't quite sure. And then on number 1, just to see if he could come up with some language that was a little clearer. I mean, I understand what it's saying, but we just wanted to clarify that a little. So
We're
it's-
working on that.
yeah.
What? Say that again, please.
Said we're working on that.
Yes.
Working on getting more clear language under number 1?
Yes.
Now, more clear language in chapter 12 of the zoning.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, we're working on more clear language for number 1, and we're just verifying that it's supposed to reference chapter 12.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I remember
But we're
finding
also
that out.
working on
Asking her.
Okay, well, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's,
If we're going to get more clear language, we ought to get more clear language in the first paragraph, too. We talked about this as part of the chapter 12. When you
Yeah,
say
every day
each
the
day the
offense.
offense continues, constitutes a separate offense, does that mean that has to be cited every day? Well,
so it was
That-
chapter
I
12.
mean,
That's
that's
subject
fairly
to
common
interpret-
language in a lot of ordinances.
I know that, but we had that conversation with Ken, and it's subject to interpretation. It's not clear.
It could be.
It could be
Could
either
be
way.
every day or could not be.
Well, it can be a continuing offense, or it can be a separate offense, and this says separate, and, you could read that to say it's got to be cited every day in order for it to repeat itself.
Yeah, otherwise there'd be lack of notice.
So it is chapter 12, okay.
Yeah.
That's why we have lawyers.
Once we fix chapter 12, we'll fix it.
Okay, so we're just waiting on that language for number 1.
Okay.
And I think
I never
that's
want to insult you.
That's right, no.
it. Is there any other questions?
What do we have to do with this in order to send it back to Lee and get it approved? Make these recommendations?
I'm going to make that change that you all just agreed on, and send it.
Will she see the change marks?
I can send her this and a clean one.
Yeah.
Well, but she has a certain amount of time before she has to get it back to us, because if it's
30
30
days.
days, I'd love to start pinging her at like 29 days and be like, where is it?
I didn't know we were going to send it back to her.
Yeah, why would we send it back to her?
Why would we send it back
Just-
to her?
it's
Well,
gotta
we
be-
still have to get the approval.
Yeah, to meet this certified local government.
Well, there's no point in sending it back to her until we get a finished product from the city.
That would be my recommendation, too.
But let's talk about the process, because we need to be clear, right? This
Let's take
This
it all the
needs-
way through to conclusion. and
This
then
needs to
send it.
go to the planning commission as a formal agenda item for review, right?
And then the city council.
And then the city council, and then once we get through that point, send it back to her,
Okay.
is what I would say.
I believe she said that we should not approve any applications for local designation until this is,
Yeah, we're
our
just-
ordinance
yeah.
is approved.
Yeah, we're just talking about.
So it's, yeah, so it's,
Everything's pretty much on
it's
hold.
holding everything.
Does it make any
Approved by whom?
sense?
Approved by whom? She said we shouldn't be delegating the designation until it's approved, meaning by city council? This version by city council?
Right.
And by
In
the
the state.
state.
Approved,
And by the
approved.
state.
By the
City
state.
council and state. And design guidelines and training and blah, blah, blah.
See, that's where I kind of get back to the whole state needs to keep their nose out of it, because we could have a historic preservation ordinance without being a certified local government.
We could.
Well, regardless of which path you take, it behooves us to move it forward through our process, get the mayor and council's approval, and then put it back to her. Even if she doesn't approve it, to your point, Travis, we can then still act on our own accord, just without the designation from the state. It allows you the flexibility to do both. Optimally, you get their approval too, and you operate with their level of designation on top of what we've already given it.
Is this, were you done? I'm sorry.
You stop it.
I was trying to jump in before Fred hijacked the conversation. Is this likely to change when we see it officially? I mean, we've just talked through it, right? I mean, unless we show up with completely different ideas, this is likely to pass through our conversation. Maybe some minor, non-substantive.
Yeah.
Misspelled words.
Yeah, grammar, punctuation.
Okay, so where I'm going with that is I don't know this gal from the state, but does it make sense to get an informal read from her to say, this is what we're pushing through. We don't want to waste time and embarrass ourselves again by getting this endorsed, water sprinkled on it and everything else, and then having it rejected. Would she give an informal opinion?
Sure it
I think
has.
so.
Does that make, it seems like it might save some time.
I'd rather do that than get an ordinance approved again by city council.
You'd rather-
I'd really rather, but.
I mean, it
this
makes
is my
sense,
thing.
you're right.
What
It
is
makes
your
sense to go
flexibility
sit and
to do
get her buy-in on it and say, hey, it looks good before we send it.
Or while it's being sent.
Yeah.
While it's going
Go ahead
through
and
the
put it through
process.
the process. We can change something once it comes before y'all in an official capacity, or we could recommend those changes at the city council.
Do the same thing, redline it for her. She's got
She's obligated to respond in 30 days.
We have to give her 30
I
days.
think that's what Angela
so.
said.
I mean, it's not going to get in
Not
front of
gonna
us
get
for 30 days anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you could hear back from her before we even see it.
It's just a thought. I mean, it just seems crazy though to, jump through all the
It makes more sense to have concurrent
the
reviews.
hoops,
She'll respond faster.
and still risk being surprised, and then cycle back through again, holding up. Are there any applications?
Four.
Yeah, I
Two-
mean,
only two of
that's-
which that we could honestly really see, depending on your definition of site structure and all that other mess. So, I mean, really, it's honestly.
so let's
that
just-
much
Be
more.
not
Five as soon as Curtis gets his in the queue.
I think
What's
what we
that?
agreed
You'll
on.
pull up 5 as soon as you get
I
yours
have
in the
not
queue.
applied. I didn't
But
even
putting
think
a marker
about
in
it.
front of your house saying you live there doesn't.
Curtis Mills found the stone bridge.
And finally, comply with the city's requirement to clear your property.
There'll be
Thank
more.
you.
Yeah,
There'll be more
finally.
trash in my front yard if they know where I live.
First, what's the definition? He's more than 50
I
years old.
Let's get back to where we were.
looking
We
for
all
the
did
tax-
just now
the tax
agree, I think we
relief
all
for
did, that
historic
we
property.
would put this document through the process without any delay. It'll take a month to get to you in October.
When they're slated for planning commission in September and then council in October.
All right. And at the same time, give it back to Lee Burns and ask her for a courtesy review. And hopefully it'll be here
Well, it
before
still
your,
gives her 30 days before our meeting.
before your meeting. And, all right, so that's
We
what
can
we're
still
going to
advertise it. It's ready in here. And if it's
Yeah,
not-
but even if we'd heard it before we hear back, still shave 30 minutes off. I mean, 30 days off minimum. It has to recycle. It doesn't go to the
Sure.
city council and then.
How did it get in front of her in the first place?
Lee?
It had to be reviewed, right?
Why?
I
Has
don't
to be
know. We give her way too much credibility.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Serious. What authority does she as an individual have? Or, I mean, is she just an advisor? Does she have authority?
She's a
Well,
full-time
she's-
employee for the state.
Keeper of the-
Sorry?
She's a full-time employee for the state.
Well, no, I know that,
What's
but
her title?
She's the keeper of the
Preservation
Guard
planner and
staff.
certified
state
local
gave her
government
authority.
That's the only clout she has,
okay.
as far as I know.
So she is the certified local government
She is the
coordinator.
certified local government
move to the next
coordinator.
one?
So any grants or anything that, we have to have an HPC to be eligible for a certified local government designation. And why do this if we're not going to do it right? If there's some overarching system that we should fit into, where all this has been doped out, and you got 159 counties in Georgia and X number of cities doing it one way, why would we not follow that when we're so new at this game?
Well, it gets to the point that I want to ask of you guys, which I think somebody just asked a second ago about how many do we have before us? And you said 4. And 2 of the 4 are by this refreshed,
Two are structures.
okay? and
Two
then
are
sites.
areas.
Okay.
We'll
So,
call
all
it
that,
sites.
so after going through all this, and if the state's interpretation is only going to be for the structures,
It's not, though. I mean, she gave us this
That was her verbal.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like I said, when you
To our
read
point-
when
the
you
point
read
that
her
I
own
think,
ordinance, it directly conflicts with what the state ordinance says.
Right, so Angela, I think you're the one who said it. It's got some messy stuff in the first part. So if she does intend to apply the stricter definition to structure, and we've got area stuff that's before us, we will only probably get the designation at the state level for the site. What are we
Well,
going to
that's
do
what I'm wondering,
about our
'cause
desire to still preserve the area?
She made that comment, but she
Sure
doesn't.
that we could
Perform, create
within
a
our
historical
own
society.
measures.
We're forming a
Defined
different
as-
organization. We're going to form a city of
Historical
mission.
So that's what we're saying is we don't have to. What I'm saying is we don't have to.
She didn't correct our paragraph
Right,
on
she
the first
didn't correct
page
it.
that says that we have purview over building structures, objects, landscape features, having special
I mean,
historical, cultural, or archaeological.
If that was her opinion, but she didn't say strike it from the
So it's our
ordinance.
authority to put that designation on it as Milton, City of Milton determined historic. But it may not clear the higher threshold of a state if she's only contemplating structures. Maybe she's given us some flexibility, maybe she hasn't. Let's put it to the test every single time, because we prefer to have a state level designation for it. Not getting it, we still don't have to fall back on not awarding a historic designation of one kind or another, because we could still fall back on a
I think where she took it out was where we called it a historical site of interest, not a historical site.
Yeah, there's a
A
difference.
historic property versus a historical
She
site. of
she
interest.
took it
She
out
left
where
in
there used to be a structure, not a site, but a structure, and the structure had been destroyed. And we wanted to preserve a structure that didn't exist.
We want to
You were
recognize
trying
the
to define it
structure.
based on the structure, not on the site itself.
Exactly.
It's defining the structure versus.
She wanted to make clear, if you use the word
site
structure,
itself.
if you use the
site
structure
itself
term.
can be historic, say like a battlefield, there was never a structure there, versus there used to be a structure here and now it's gone. That
So you
we
wouldn't
would
designate the
recognize.
structure, you designate the
The
site.
site,
Like designating the site for the old school on Birmingham Highway won't fly.
correct.
Yeah. Or the house that
It's
used to
not
be
there
on the
anymore.
intersection of Birmingham.
Right.
Probably not going to work.
Right.
Because
Right.
it's gone. But
Long
it
gone.
sounds like the good news is we're all after the same thing. We're going to take it to the highest level of designation that we can get the state to comply with. Short of their compliance with our request, we can still levy a Milton historic designation on it and get the objective that we're after, which is, within our minds, it has value to our city.
Recognition.
And we recognize it as such.
We will still be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, did you read the definition for site? It pretty much covers it.
Right.
Site means the location of a significant event, a prehistoric or historical occupation or activity, or a building or structure, whether standing, ruined, or vanished, where the location itself maintains historical or archaeological value, regardless of the value of any existing structure. So, I mean, if you have a site, this is where such and such used to be. Okay, fine, it's still historic. That structure might be falling down, but we consider the site historic.
Okay, done. Or done the right aspects.
Okay, let's move on. Ordinance.
The H1 ordinance. Having removed all the zoning discussion out of the HBC document, I was asked to create this historic district for the zoning ordinance, just to initiate the discussion on whether or not the city wants to go down this path or not. So I think you all can review this document. I think one of the most important parts is scope and intent. That the H district is intended to allow for historic structure to be used, protected, renovated, and preserved based on its historic value to the community. It may allow a specific previous use to continue in a structure where that use would be considered non-conforming as defined in the current Milton zoning code. All of the standards that you would find in a zoning district, like in the AG1 district or R1 district, all the standards, the front yard setback, the height, all of that is open-ended in this document. In other words, these historic sites and historic buildings are going to be probably non-conforming in every way. And so at the point at which the city council considers granting this H district status to a property, it will set all the standards at that time. The use, the height, the size, the setbacks, because most all of it's going to be non-conforming. So in that sense, it's kind of open-ended so that they can design exactly what they want when this is before them. It's sort of like in the CUP district. In the CUP district where you create a residential neighborhood, you get to name your own setbacks. In other words, like setbacks, your building setback from the street. In every other district, it's specified, no closer than 30 feet, no closer than 25 feet. But in a CUP district, the city council gets to say, oh, okay, in this case, 5 feet, 10 feet, whatever. And so all of that design standard is open-ended in this and I call it the H1 district, simply because we're going to get ourselves all tangled up in a historic district if we don't do something like that. So you could call it the HP district, but I'm calling it the H1 district just for conversation purposes.
I guess just to clarify for myself, can you have one parcel and just call that a historic district?
Absolutely. You can call it a historic district, and it also would be a H1 property.
I mean, I looked at our
district.
zoning map. It doesn't look like it occurs too awful often, but it can happen. That you have like literally one piece of property zoned one way. And,
I mean,
I can call it a district. I don't know.
I mean, we're probably just mincing words. I mean, we've got an AG1 zoning district.
Right.
Your property's zoned AG1, right? So it is, pardon me?
It's not, but never mind.
No, but I mean, my point is, that your property is in the AG1 zoning district, right?
You can have
You
a
can
chunk
down
of
to one
C1
parcel.
surrounded by
The only thing
A1.
this does do is it precludes anything besides the structure, the way it's written.
Right.
It does what precludes
Right.
anything but the structure.
It has to be a structure for this to apply.
It
as
has to be a
written.
structure for this to apply. It has to be a use that is historical in that structure. It can't be a use that was down the street a long time ago, like a blacksmith shop moving into this building. It has to be a historic use from this historic structure. And before an applicant can even apply for the H1 district, it must have come through the HPC and been designated as a historic property.
As far as the HPC is concerned, I mean, I'm not even reading the zoning because it has nothing to do with the HPC.
Right.
The only decision the HPC is going to make is whether it's historic or not.
That is correct.
Period. And whatever happens beyond the HPC is your domain.
It's in the domain
Where
of
it's
the
historic,
planning
yes or no,
division.
that's the deal.
With respect to what?
I'm sorry?
With respect to what?
As far as the zoning application is an entirely different process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're looking at a historic
You're looking
designation
at historic
proposal.
properties, and you're looking at
Yeah.
land use.
Right.
So they can't even apply
Except-
for this zoning designation unless that
Except
property has already been
that
called.
if you,
Right.
if you designate, just so we're all on the same page, if you designate something as historic and they in turn apply for an H1 zoning district the way it's written, city council is going to determine what the design criteria are for that property on a case-by-case basis, as written.
That's correct.
Not the design of the building, design of the, the setbacks and everything. Is that what you mean? That's what you're saying,
No.
not the actual.
Setback, parking regulations, height.
Right.
Right?
Fencing,
Use,
signage.
But not the color or, gable.
Well, color's going to be defined by the overlay.
Right.
Or, in the case of a
The
historic
HPC.
property, it could be from the design guidelines of the historic preservation who has color schemes in them.
There's nothing in the ordinance that allows the Historic Preservation Commission to override the existing zoning ordinances. Because you're still going to have that in a regular, whatever zone it is, right? It's not going to be, they don't have the latitude to do
What are
that.
we talking about colors? Where would there be a color?
Birmingham has a color palette in the design guidelines for Birmingham as an example.
HPC has nothing to do with color. They took that out a long time ago.
No, we're saying the same thing. I'm just,
Okay.
Okay, well,
Using
I
it
think we are
as
all
an
saying the
example.
same thing. So anyway, the process of the H1 document that you're holding would be, it has to be advertised and go to the planning commission and then go to the city council.
and I know you wrote, the only thing I saw in here that's kind of weird, first, we don't have an historic preservation society, right?
Not yet.
But, I'm sorry?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But more importantly, and you guys need to weigh in on this, do you want the Historic Preservation Society to designate a place of historic interest that would then be subject to H1 zoning?
I don't think that would be binding under city law anywhere, would it? That would just be the historic society.
I mean,
It's
just-
a site
that would
of
just
interest.
Being
Sign
designated
out in
historic
front
interest
yard.
is not the same as a historic
Historic,
property, and
right.
therefore it could not be.
No, I know, but this says the structure must be designated either as historic by the HPC or a place of historic interest by the City of Milton Historic Preservation Society. I mean, I thought we were talking about with the Historic Society was putting a sign up that says you're entering the historic Birmingham area or something like
George, I
that.
agree with you. I think that should be stricken. I don't think the historic society has much play in this at
Okay.
all.
Which is like commission,
So I
period.
apologize for that being in there.
Okay.
Didn't jump out at me.
So you're striking
Or,
first part of D,
The last part,
Second
last
Second
part of
part.
the first sentence in D.
Right
starting
here, starting
with or.
Place of historic interest.
Just put a period after Preservation Commission.
Yep.
Are we opening this up for general comment?
Yes, but one thing before we do, I did mention that it would come to the planning commission as a work session item first. So there's plenty of time to edit this document. And I'm finished, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Okay, I think that this applies to maybe one or two properties, the way we analyzed it. And I think it's effectively spot zoning. And I think it introduces commercial retail in otherwise AG1 land. And on that basis, I am against it. I was against it 4 or 5 years ago. I'm still against it.
I have a similar question. So this is suggesting that, which I think is the same thing Joan was saying, is that there was a site that existed at one point as a business. There's a gap, and this is allowing it, provided it's got this documentation,
It's allowing to reclaim that use.
reintroduce that use.
Right.
It's allowing them to apply to the city council to reintroduce that use.
Okay.
Does that put it on technically the same status as a residential AG1 person asking if they can, or the Chatham, the store, right? I mean,
I'll take a swag.
Hardham.
I read
Hardham
this,
and
I thought
store.
this is an end around to the Chatham property.
yeah.
You got it.
It's just that simple.
But it's not. To Curtis's point, it doesn't
It's
give
got to
them
be
any more
designated
status.
historic
No.
first.
If he's
I mean,
successful, it does.
It's suggested that
Yeah,
it
that's one
would
of
be
those.
viewed favorably.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too strong, but that's as far as it goes.
What it does do in terms of something like the Chatham store is it would prevent dominoes up and down the street because after all, there are no other historic properties up and down the street that would fall
Yeah.
Right.
that as it might if it were zoned commercial. There are other properties that could be zoned commercial up and down the street, and I think that's a lot of fear, is that other dominoes will fall.
See that?
Wait.
We've already solved that. All these guys need to do is designate that a historic district for a mile up and down the street, and we're done.
Wait, are you saying there's no other country store? There are a few now.
Contributing or not contributing.
Right.
This is-
It
Well, if they're not there, how do you, if they're not there, how do you decide?
I don't care what you think about
Well,
it.
never mind. In that- in that- this is example of Chatham
corn mill.
property. The little parcel is kitty corner from that.
I think we've fallen
Wait,
since I was 10.
yes, let's talk about it. Are you talking about the Coca-Cola house?
Yes.
With the one wall?
What was that?
That was a country store with a corn mill. That was the White's Country Store.
Okay.
Arrow White. And there was a lot of stuff that went on at that corner. I know it's horrible.
I
Now.
love it.
I love it.
But, and I know a lot, it's a big eyesore, but there really is some history there. And then that little house next door is what's the
My
home
question was going
place.
to be, did it ever sell gas?
I think it did.
See? So-
Oh, wait, but I don't want to say that for sure, because I know
But just
Hardman
play
store,
with-
not
play
Chatham,
with-
Hardman
play
store
with it
did.
that way. Say it did sell gas.
Okay.
In whatever capacity.
Well, then number E,
Then what?
the use is compatible with the surrounding
It
residential
could become a
neighborhood.
gas station again, by what this says.
Good
But
point.
it could become a gas station again if
If
the
it
owner
was
wanted to
zoned.
apply for a commercial zoning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but it would be heard in a different way without the support of something like this. They would give it a leg up on just being a C1 zoning or an M1 zoning request in the middle of AG.
But
They
you
would
allow- I
say,
guess
I'm
we get the city
pursuing this
council.
with, oh, by the way, I meet all these parameters. So you got a leg up compared to somebody coming in right out of the box with having to secure a C1 or an M1 designation.
They did sell gas, too.
What, the White Store?
The,
The Hardeman store did sell
Yes.
gas. There was a gas tank, which
because they
maybe-
took out
I
the
think-
gas tank with
Mhm.
no, they had no permission to remove it.
So it'd be like
But-
a one pump Old Country Store versus a Quick Trip.
Ultimately,
Doesn't
city
matter.
council has to approve everything, so
Right.
the elected
They can just
officials
say
say
no.
yes or no. So-
Well, or they could just say yes.
Not the ordinance.
So let's go back. What is the purpose of this ordinance?
They haven't even started building the gas station they did approve.
Why do
Right.
we need this?
We have to protect those.
So they haven't even started building the gas station they did approve, but
This ordinance is about
Still
use,
hasn't
not
done
about
anything.
preservation of
The
structure.
problem is that
And this is a ordinance that would allow historic uses on properties where they are otherwise prohibited in the current Milton zoning ordinance.
So it says up there in the
But I
first
don't,
paragraph,
I
a
don't
specific
understand that,
treatment.
Tom. I mean, unless we're gonna go through and superimpose this designation on property, which we can't do, the owner of the property is still gonna have to get it rezoned from whatever it is to something.
Right?
right.
This or C1 or what have you.
Whatever.
Right.
How does this facilitate that versus just getting a C1?
I think that an owner could apply for either of those designations if he wanted to turn, say, the Hardeman store into a gas station. He could go to the city council and apply for C1, or he could go to the city council, provided he'd been through this body and been designated historic structure, property. He could then ask the city council to designate H1. The only difference between C1 and H1 in that district, in my opinion, is H1 is not likely to domino down the street. There's no pressure to domino down the street, as there might be pressure from a C1 to domino down the street. That's the only difference that I see in it.
And the uses too.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
uses.
And the
you're
fact that-
very defined
That's how you
uses
control it.
in the sense that you're defined by what that structure was historically, correct?
Right.
What is- yeah.
Right.
We're all dancing around this. We all know what.
We all know what
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
no, we do.
about.
But I'm just, at the end of the
And
day.
these arguments have been here as long as I have.
What is this? What is this about?
What is this about?
Yeah,
It's
what
about
am I,
the-
what am I missing?
The Hardeman
Thompson.
store on the corner
Hardeman
of
store.
Thompson and Hopewell.
I thought it was about my building.
Don't personalize it, Curtis.
No, you don't know this. These guys
We
know
know,
this,
we know,
but
we know.
there used to be prostitution in my building.
Oh!
So I'm waiting at the edge of my seat for this thing to be passed.
It's not specifically about.
Here we go.
You're the lamb.
I'm kidding.
No neon.
No billboards.
Right.
You can have neon, it just says open or closed.
But that would, I mean, that would position the Hardeman store more favorably than it was last time, where we just said, look, spot zoning.
Hardeman.
Hardeman
Chatham property,
store.
Hardeman store.
Chatham and Hardeman are cousins.
It was his mother's
All
family.
right, but there's two separate properties, right?
No, the only
No,
one in
same
question
one.
is the one.
The
on-
Hardeman store is owned by
Bill
Same
Hardeman
Southwest one.
died.
Okay,
And
so the
sold-
Chatham, I'm
sold
thinking
it
it's
to his
Chatham, is the
uncle. I mean,
replaying.
It's one
Yes.
to say.
We call it the Hardeman
Same
store.
one, same.
The same place. What about
It's the same place. It's
There's two
Hardeman
Hardeman
store.
stores.
That's the white.
The one that I know that's really the Hardeman store is the one that's the White House that Chatham wants to reopen again. Then there's another Hardeman store that's down the road that is kind of had a limo sign on it for years.
And when you and I
That's-
said Coca-Cola building, we were talking about
Okay,
the same.
that's
building.
the White Country store, and that's catty corner from the
Right
Hardeman
across the
store
street.
Okay.
at Thompson and Hopewell.
On the northeast side.
So which one sold gas?
The Hardeman.
The Hardeman
The white
store.
one.
Which
On
I
the
think
south.
was the Chatham
Yes.
store.
Yeah.
Right.
The one to be the butcher.
Yes,
Yeah.
we looked, the city council reviewed, actually never got to city
Never got
council, but it got to
city.
the planning commission,
Yeah.
Mark King,
Well, he wanted it, yeah,
Adele. slash.
Dell,
Adele, whatever.
art,
whatever.
everything.
But they
Or-
could come in,
Probably
rebuild
eventually.
back to the original structure, which had gas, put a pump out there.
No,
No,
Yes.
it's not historic anymore. It has to be a historic structure under H1. We approve it as a historic
Okay,
structure.
so that
yes or no.
structure as it
has to
appears
be
now.
Yeah, it can be rehabbed,
Rehab.
renovated within the guidelines, and then so the structure you see there is the
Within what
structure that
guide-
has to be
Within
there.
what guidelines?
whatever guidelines we approved for the structure. when we
No, the
approved it.
guidelines are here.
They're for you, okay.
No, they're not us.
No, it's you.
Those are district
I mean,
standards on that sheet, but you're talking about the guidelines as far as what is
No,
historic.
they can't build a new
structure,
store.
Right?
No, but I mean, they could conform back by getting approved the design that had a gas pump in front of it and actually pump gas. Might not be a Quick Trip, but
Sure.
they
They
could
would.
pump gas and be under this, it would be okay.
It would be okay
Yes.
under this if the city council said it was okay under this.
Right.
Which takes us again full circle. I mean, the city
Which they
council
could
could
do
say that for
anyways.
C1 if they
Yeah.
wanted to.
Is
They
the
could.
question whether it's good for the community to reintroduce original uses,
Sorry, Red Sox. Go ahead.
or is the question whether it's good for the community to reinstate original uses, or is it just an interesting thing?
I think the question that came up before, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the question that came up before is if the historic use is the only way that the property can be maintained as an historic property, then you want to try and allow that to be reinstated versus saying, I can't do anything with this, I'm going to tear it down and build X.
Highest
Unless-
value
unless
would be
you look for
something
other
else.
Incentives to allow them
Right.
to keep it. It could be a storage building if they pay zero taxes.
Yeah, I'm just saying, that was the intent behind it.
Yeah, but maintenance and upkeep and all that gets expensive.
How far can somebody go with modifying an historic structure before it isn't historic?
That's what we would have to vote on, because I asked that, because here's a picture of it with gas pumps. This is the
Oh,
application.
neat.
It, yeah, we would have to vote on whether the porch on the front made it less historic.
Was it only the external, John, or is it the internal too?
No, external only minus paint.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
any internal modifications are fair game, it doesn't change the historic nature?
Right.
Okay.
They might have lifted it up too.
I'm just thinking the one they just redone one in
Did
Compton,
lift it up.
right down off the square. It was a Sinclair service station. The city bought it and is now taking it back to it. I mean, redone the whole building, Sinclair.
Where's this?
Old pump
Cummins.
in Cummins on the right.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Huh.
total. I mean, it's great. Well, that's fine, and it's not gonna be a gas station, okay? I mean, it's strictly a, quote,
It's always
viewing it
somebody
as what it was. But that's what I'm saying. Could they, in fact, do the same thing, but pump gas? And as you said, it had to go back to council because it would then be a gas station.
Well, this document is just beginning the conversation. Obviously, it's a long and lengthy conversation with a lot of different points to be considered in that. It's just the beginning.
The only seed I was going to plant there is that the nature, just like the nature of Milton is different than maybe Savannah and maybe what the lady from the DNR is used to dealing with. I mean, this is low-density rural where there were general stores when it was difficult to travel more than a few miles. And, so a commercial center was that store serving fairly small local population, totally different than economic centers like maybe a Crabapple, maybe Birmingham, but a lot of what was there is gone now.
Crossroads.
And the Crossroads. Yeah, so I'm just wondering whether it's in the best interest of Milton to have that. But George, your point's a valid one. If that's what it takes to retain it. I'm almost whatever it takes, short of spot zoning. It's a tough one.
You could always move the store to Birmingham.
Yeah,
Like
that's a
everything.
great idea.
Wouldn't be historic anymore.
It would lose its historic eligibility.
Put it in front of the house of ill repute.
That's why they told me I
Okay.
couldn't do the
Let's,
prosecution.
why don't we move on? The HPC has abdicated to us on this one, and it's got to come through our normal process anyway, so we'll just take it up when it's.
So where do you want it to go? I mean, because this is kind of informal, so do you want us to start?
I'd rather get the ordinance through us first and then worry about the next one after that.
After council has approved the ordinance? or,
No, not necessarily. I mean, put it on the agenda at the following meeting if you want.
okay.
I also wanted to ask about time frame. If the permitted use ceases to exist on the subject site, the zoning shall revert back to the district in force at the adoption of this zoning ordinance. So that would mean that it would go back to Ag 1?
Whatever it is today.
Yeah, so it's what it is. So then what do we do, like time frame? Is there any, should there be any indication in here about time frame? Like if the business goes belly up and,
A week later, we say, okay, it's AG1 now.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, or
that
just-
seemed a little vague.
Yeah.
Good point.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Usually it used to be like
Yeah.
36 months when they used to enforce. Well, that's.
Well, I mean, I like 6-month rule. If it ceases to operate for 6 months.
Oh, okay. I was just saying if they never develop, well.
It says it's the permitted use
Yeah,
ceases
6
to exist.
months.
What if they just start selling stuff out of there they shouldn't be selling?
Well, we got
That'd be
code
the,
enforcement officers for that.
how many? One?
Enough.
Don't go there.
Called them 100 times. So,
That's because Curtis had them running around all over the place.
Thanks for that comment.
So we're at Curtis House visiting the help.
Just try to keep it interesting.
So, back, okay, we're going to move on, but you guys, I just want to ask one last question. I think Travis is right. To the extent that this thing has been elevated, but that's all, it's still historic, as long as the shell's intact, even though it's 3 feet far off the ground.
I can't,
They
we couldn't
took
make
off-
that decision today, George.
Yeah.
Sorry?
We couldn't make that decision today until, now, we have an application, but we don't have an ordinance to review the application
Yeah, I-
with, and the state hasn't reviewed the
I
application
think
either.
in looking at that, the overhang that's on the front entrance there
Yeah.
rotted off. 'Cause I think it had fallen off. So
Oh,
when
it's
they
got a
did
porch
bring
on
it
it.
back,
It's
now
gonna
they put a
answer
covered porch on it.
This is going to answer it.
Pretty much for ADA compliance because it's
So-
got a ramp up it.
But,
So they would have had to do that anyway.
but does the covered porch have to come off to make it historic?
We would have to decide
It's
that.
just
That's
an-
what- As what the state said. I won't say Lee Burns.
They
It's
haven't
just a
adopted design guidelines yet.
I know, I'm just trying to get my own head around what makes, I mean, you know, Curtis has got 2 buildings where his office is that are theoretically historic, because the outside looks like what it once did, but the inside doesn't look anything like it, right?
They added the front porch on Newton House like in 1900 too. Didn't used to have one. You know, you've seen those pictures of the old couple on the.
I mean,
didn't
Well,
even
you
used to
had
be
to add
there.
ramps to be ADA compliant. So now
Widen the
there's something on the
bathroom.
outside.
Widen the
well, I'm
bathroom
thinking
door.
of another building.
chair.
Say the little house up there in front of St. Aidan's. They used to have a door. Now it's got a window in the exact same spot. How much does that really affect the house? Because was that really the front entrance? No, it was never the front entrance of the house. So does it really affect the value or the significance of that property? Probably not.
We're not going to have an application that's going to be black and white simple, because every 100-year-old house has been touched. Everyone's got air conditioning now, and those are just decisions you have to make. When we, and also, I don't know if you guys know this, when we get an application, before we ever see it, it goes to the state where the DNR opines on it, and then we get it back with their thoughts.
But don't you think a
Is
big
that true,
part of
Angela?
the
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh,
State
yeah.
reviews it.
These applications?
Yes.
Why?
The state who? DNR does?
Why?
They cut all 4 of them, and they're the ones that kicked back and said we need to change our
Yeah, they
ordinance.
review.
I think you guys have
Is this
engaged
gal
somebody
from the
that you
DNR?
didn't
Yes.
engage.
Historic Preservation Division.
No, that changes. Don't look at me like that.
Y'all can do that offline. The point is that every app's going to be different.
I tried.
Yeah. All right,
Move on.
let's
You know,
take,
Don't y'all have another meeting?
My car.
let's take a 5-minute break so we can separate the
What time is your
historic committee from the
7:30
sign
right now.
ordinance.
You guys
For
are-
the point of doing the sign ordinance.
No, we got 2 things to do on HBC first. Okay?
We do?
We haven't talked about the applications yet, or the
What
design
application?
guidelines. These applications I'm holding, these are applications to the HPC.
Oh, okay.
And I just wanted to briefly say, there's 5. Phil's Crossroads, which we already discussed, was primarily assigned to be handled either by the Historic Society or the City Council initiated sign application. There's one for the Vice Country Store, does not have signature of owner. It's on hold until we get that signature of
Did the
Doesn't
owner,
have-
did the owner
Doesn't
apply or
have-
did
It doesn't
someone
have
else
to have the signature. though.
apply on?
Julie applied.
Well, I think you're gonna wanna have signature of
Really?
the owner before you consider this.
Well, that was the thing.
That's
that-
gonna be.
I don't think we can
fair.
require the owner's
The
permission.
red one at Birmingham.
Maybe their
Crossroads.
signature, but not their permission.
You can't,
But
you're not
No.
required to
what if
have
the owner
it.
refuses to sign?
I'll give you my signature, but I'm not going to approve it.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Whatever you.
Nothing in
that's
our-
up for you, that's up for your, as a.
It's kinda technical, George.
Whether or not you wanna act on it
Uh-huh.
without
That
the
was
owner's
technical.
permission. I guess that's
Wait,
our
wait,
ability to
talk
do it.
about that for a second, 'cause that's gonna be very difficult, I think, to get that.
It is gonna be very difficult.
I mean, we can find them.
Well, that's why
can
when
go
we talked to
I
the
mean,
state,
but
the state
we
said,
can't
don't
talk.
add permission.
Right.
We've been through, I mean,
Alright, so that's enacted for.
and we don't have it in our ordinance, and it's not in the state model.
Okay. The other one I have is the Summit School site. Again, it was a sign. We know how to handle that. We've got the old Haygood store, and we have the Hardeman store.
What's the
Which is
hay,
the
what's the hay goods?
The building on Bethany Bend,
A half a
not
wall.
Bethany Bend Road.
Brick,
Oh,
that's
yeah. I'm sorry, Bethany Way.
It's really a ruin, and whether or not, you know, it gets
It's a
designated.
ruin.
like that.
Bethany
Those are the three applications that you have that you will eventually see on your first agenda.
Who submitted the application for Vice Store?
Which one?
Julie Brown Bailey.
Yeah.
Is that approved by the council?
She's a citizen. It was a.
That's not one of the options under the ordinance.
It says
Uh,
something about.
Interested
Historic
parties.
properties, it's got to be the city council by
What?
majority vote, the HPC by majority vote, or historical society, neighborhood association, or the property owner.
You're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, I remember Julie asking me to ask you tonight, the HBC, do you feel that this property is worth considering as a historic property?
Do we have to submit the application if we think so?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
say it again?
Yes.
We have, can we accept it and submit it?
Well, I mean, that's
But you all would have
technicality,
to.
but you got to do it by.
That's what I'm asking. I want to make sure we follow it, and I know it doesn't, I mean, when we start having people put in applications, it's like, wait a minute, you're not city council
How
applying
many
for it.
people are on your
Individual
commission?
council
Are
member.
there seven?
A council member submitted it, and not the council.
So Julie did all of them?
No.
Councilman
Bill
Russ.
left.
You're
Bill
right.
Lusk.
We need to get these submitted differently because it was not done by,
Either council.
but the HBC,
By the way, you have it written.
HBC can nominate them yourself.
Sure.
And so here are three choices, here are three options that you could possibly nominate.
Keep it legal.
I'm just saying, can we accept those nominations and present them as our?
You have to.
You can take the information, you don't have to accept them from what they are.
Right.
And then it becomes your application.
So we just,
Just your
we fill out an
nomination.
application and just
Right,
type that
we
on
just
there.
get a new
Yeah, you can be the
application.
nominating body if
Take
you
one out.
choose to be. Anyway, I didn't want to dwell on that, I just wanted everybody to know that we had.
Hold on, Tom, hold on one second. I'd like to make a motion to the HBC, since we're adjourned, we're in session here,
not
that we
in
accept these, it was a work session, isn't it? Sorry, I thought I had it.
No, I saw where you're going, but yeah, no, I agree with you.
Just get them in, we can work on them later.
And lastly, did everybody get a copy of the design guidelines?
No.
No. Well, Angela pulled together a preliminary set of design guidelines for you to
Accept them and then we'll
consider.
vote on the merits
Which are
later.
Probably not as detailed as you want them to be, HBC. So we're going to pass these out to you for you to consider at your next work session or your next meeting. Right. And I'm only saying this is to say,
Needs
you
enough
need
to
to
done,
be
we ought
thinking
to at
about
least
your design
take it
guidelines.
full merit.
Our chairman are not listening right now.
I understand that. You know,
I mean, the assistant here.
They're
Excuse
bored.
me. No, chairman, because we have to do something.
we're gonna-
Sorry, I just want you to listen to Tom.
We're going to distribute to you a set of design guidelines as an example. I think they're probably not as detailed as you want. They're probably not even specific for this kind of architecture that we have here. I'm only saying this because you need to think about your design guidelines so that you'll have something to use when you make these decisions. So we're going to pass them out to you. You consider them, and because you're going to have to come up with your own design guidelines.
Is for a district or a property or just a district?
For whatever. The district, if you have a district, a single property, if you have a single property, maybe they can be all combined into one. I don't know, it depends on what kind of properties you're preserving, so. But you need to come up with some before you make your first designation.
And as they're written right now, they're, like you said, very general. We're not talking about roof pitches and how many panes of windows, how many panes in the windows. It's, you know, how to handle the renovations, when can you use new material versus old material. They're pretty general. So, I mean, we have design guidelines in terms of structure already, and I don't think we needed to reinvent the wheel. You know, we've got that covered in the overlay already. So, but we'll get you a copy of that.
Thank you.
Okay? And I think now it's time for the take five.
One comment, Mark.
Well, I thought we were done.
Before you leave,
thought we were done.
Let's talk about it around up.
this ordinance was passed. And
Yes.
what we're talking about here is an amendment. right?
Revision, yeah.
There's no reason that they can't operate under the ordinance as it's written.
Well, they decided not to. I mean,
Well, no, they can elect not to, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, to the extent that they want to act on these applications, as long as it's consistent with the ordinance that's been passed, they should be able to do that.
I don't disagree. I do know that we spoke earlier about hesitating because the state recommended that we hesitate.
I understand, I'm just saying, but legally, they've got the right to do that because the
We've got an
ordinance was
ordinance, you're
passed.
absolutely right. We've got an
So
ordinance.
you
that
guys
we
don't
can
have to
go forward
wait.
with.
We
You
have
don't
an
have to
ordinance
wait
in
to
place
move-
we can act on. as
You don't
long
have to
as
wait to
the state
move
says
through the process, right, of reviewing these things.
We have to
and-
wait for the state to approve those applications. If that's what you're talking about. The state has to approve it before we approve it.
They don't have to look at those applications.
No, that's not the way this is written.
Angela?
The state looks at the application.
And they make the approvals for us, and then we have to make the approvals. Am I right or wrong?
Well, then this needs to include that, right?
I don't
Is that-
see that written anywhere in this ordinance. I've never heard of that, and Angela, that's the first I've heard of it. So where you and I will have to talk about that tomorrow. What? I mean, I've never known one to go to the
That's why
DNR.
we said we need an ordinance before we start taking applications.
Right.
Okay.
She didn't put anything in our
Let's take
ordinance.
five.
She had
Take
the right to
five.
look at them.
Let's move on.
Tom, I thought you were going to ask HBC.
So I keep on going back to, she made comments that aren't consistent with her own ordinance.
Oh, yeah. I just thought it might be, does anybody on the HBC have interest in going to, as a group, going to the Roswell Historic Preservation Commission and just seeing them in action and maybe even having coffee with them afterward and asking a few questions about them? Would that be something you'd be interested in?
We know you want.
How did Kate go?
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can get that set up at their next meeting and then,
Yeah, and ask them if everything they do, they go to the state first.
they don't,
Yeah,
I
you know.
promise you. And so we're gonna have to find out
Can
why.
I ask one quick question also before you go ahead? This city, whatever we're trying to get, tell me again what we're trying to get, the city small.
Certified local government.
Is this something that the city of Milton is doing for the city of Milton?
No,
Like-
it's important for the city to maintain a certified local government.
This
It
not
is.
the-
That's what I'm trying to
this
figure out.
is
So
not
it's-
qualified local government. This is something different.
Oh, it's not.
Oh, this is not
Historic.
qualified local
Oh,
government.
well.
We
No,
would
no,
never-
so is it
Yeah.
like,
City or something like
Patty,
that.
we were adjourning, okay? We were
Sorry.
adjourning.
No,
If it isn't, then I would.
Oh, I don't worry about it. That's why I say.
oh yeah, no, it's just, it's for
Yeah.
grants, but I
Yeah.
understand that, but I was wondering if the city of Milton was pushing this for the whole, not what you're talking about, this other
The
part.
city council is pushing
So
it.
that we, as a whole, get this designation.
What are you talking about? This only has to do with HPC.
Okay, and that's what I'm
It would
asking.
help, because it would
Yeah,
help
sure.
accomplish some of the things that you're after, because if it qualifies you to
With money.
Get grants. and-
Grants and
Right.
things
I'm
like
help
just-
support some of the things you're talking about.
Okay.
Money.
It's good to
You have
have
to
it,
weigh whether it's.
but it's not the death killer that losing your qualified local government status would be. We don't ever lose
So then
that.
if you ask
Okay.
Take
Roswell,
five.
if you don't follow the guidelines, how do you?
Take five, take five.
Maybe there's federal elements, maybe you don't need money.
You mean minutes or cookies? Let's get this straight.
All of the above.
Where does it say we have to send it to that moron downtown? Notification of Historic Preservation Division. Never mind.
Historical Society
it's
and
there.
Roundup.
4, page 8.
You can't come up with
Got it, because I drank a whole
Thanks, Jordan.
I hate that lady.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, just 5 minutes until they get back.
Trying to do it right, Mark.
You, one thing I'm assured of, you're going to do it right. I'm assured of that. I'm going to go to the 30,000-foot level. Are you ready to meet whatever we're going to meet about?
Yes, I'm ready. I was just trying to clean up my mess.
Okay.
I'm not bird dogging that one.
Oh, yeah, here.
We're not sending stuff to the DNR.
but she's got us in
I know, I agree with you. She made comments.
What are you reading from?
It's in the
Our
document.
ordinance.
She's gonna sit there and preach that.
We have to file a
We're not
report
gonna do
with,
that.
we have to file a report with the DNR, but not for approval.
All that matters, forget the soft stuff, just focus on the.
Where are you in the
Submit
ordinance?
the report
We got
required.
HBC building.
I mean, we must submit it, and they're gonna say yea or nay.
Where are you in the
We
ordinance?
file a report, I don't mind doing that, but we're not
When we
holding
were
up
Cherokee.
our own approval until they
He's gonna
approve.
do a timeline going back from Native American time through the time we were Cherokee County. And this
Right.
details
The committee has to submit a report to the Historic Preservation Division. That's it, just
Of our
a
action,
report.
of
Yeah.
our action,
Yeah.
that's all. It doesn't have to
That's
go
all
there
that's
and-
required under the
It
ordinance,
doesn't have
and
to
that's
go
after
there.
the fact.
Ideas forthcoming.
That's after the
Okay?
fact.
Okay.
Nobody does that.
So our display will be a timeline and blow-ups
Good.
of a map.
Okay, oh, well, yeah, no less than.
No, they wanna know what actions we've taken so they can.
Trail of Tears.
Prior,
And then
no
we
less than
blow up
30
of the
days prior
building.
to making a
Okay.
recommendation.
Round up,
The
yeah.
HPC
Okay,
must submit
so
a
it's-
report.
it's-
So we
It's when we
submitted
were
prior.
Cherokee, we only have
Okay,
5
let's send
minutes.
them to the report.
Okay, but we're just not.
Okay.
We're not waiting for them to
We're
approve
also
it.
going to try to do
Okay.
history talks. Ellen Jones from Alfred Historical Society said that she would do one. And then I
fine with
think
me.
that since Norm is doing the timeline, so that we did for 2 hours, that he could do a talk too. So, do we have any other
We did.
suggestions?
Martine brought it up.
Martine will not do it. Martine will not do it. I asked her, like eye to eye. No. Why? They're,
How are you?
she's not the person.
How's baby?
Can I suggest that you have your meeting back here in this room, it'd be really nice.
Does she work in the bistro or the pub or neither?
She works 2 minutes less, Tom.
Does she really?
We'll be out before yours start.
We'll be done. We'll be done. Okay. So, John Marvin Doors, Norm's going to ask him. Okay.
They were down.
That.
Couple of spaces being renovated.
He put a bunch of ideas, scan old
Yeah.
pictures.
That's only temporary.
He can use mine.
You're talking about you,
No,
that's
no,
your
no, no,
background.
this has
I
to
always
be a
assume
roundup.
people are talking
This
about
is,
me.
this has to be a roundup. It has to be like, people bring their pictures to roundup.
Everybody I know down there is still a bit
Curtis' office.
retired.
We want to use Curtis's office.
You can do that. You can do that.
Thank you. Oh, Curtis, our hero.
It needs to be better than last year, though, because you were all by yourself.
Thank you, Curtis.
I'm sorry, I was busy running the
Okay.
event for the 4th year in a
All
row.
right,
Okay,
Travis.
Norm has signed up.
Actually, you were involved, but I mean, it, you know, it was just John,
Trev.
kind of.
Okay,
I'm
okay,
up there
that's what I
from
need.
6 to 8.
Better location,
Mark.
too. Better booth location.
Mark, when?
3 o'clock.
3 till.
Linda
Doesn't matter.
Tournament,
I didn't set
Probably
it.
till
Three
you
till
close.
That was all
five,
denied.
or 3 till 6?
Well, I talked to them, back. They said,
Bad guy.
Very good.
yeah, you're the bad guy.
Okay.
Okay,
Can I make that off the table?
let's stand, let's stand
Thank
ready.
you.
Normal do 2 hours. What day? The 15th. About whatever. Very good, okay. I have a wedding meeting, I gotta leave at 4, so I need somebody responsible who can tear down.
That's not you.
And the good news, Curtis, the good news is we don't have to
Okay,
do
very
a
good.
CPAC booth this year.
Bob Myers is
Pardon me?
interested in work on your remodel your house or your society.
Is he gonna be-
He's interested in it.
Is he gonna be selling his
I am
books?
But now
trying to
wait,
make a
now this is
decision
what I have to
this
ask you.
week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got
What class did you have?
back.
Sit down.
Oh, that's right, you
Okay,
said
very
that.
good.
Happy Summit, that's all
I think
you.
Bob Myers would come and talk about some of his
I thought it was
pictures
Pilates or
whatever.
yoga.
We don't believe you're taking physics.
Did you say this? He has a form there that he passes out to
I am.
I
All
got
right,
Okay,
are you really taking physics or
I
is
got
it
preliminary.
No, he doesn't even have his books open.
Hi,
Okay.
but
Okay, Historical Society, Steering Committee, we've got
Why?
Howard, Todd Myers, Joyce Samples,
Well, you
Byron
don't have to go
Burgess,
into that.
Norm, Patty,
It is what it
Travis,
is.
Carrie
I love
Schlenker.
it. That's
And
okay.
I contacted another
But
couple of
so to add,
people.
How much longer do you
I'm waiting for the from, so has picked up on classes. Now, the thing is, her cannot do this without having it approved, okay? So we can't have a steering committee. So,
And I said, you know
I'm gonna
what?
try to get that.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's.
I'd throw a hammer, of course. So it like drifted up, and I said, I'd bulldoze the thing and build a new one. Why in the world?
Yeah,
Everything else.
the world is
So that's
not.
just
What
like,
Ken
I
said,
just don't know what to
we're
do.
doing this
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The rules of physics that applied 5 years ago no longer apply.
Well, it's just ridiculous, and it's so kitchen, I mean, they do it.
The commission should reach out and
Have you had physics before?
I didn't take
I guess that falls under our whole promote
And
resident.
then what he said was, and then what he said was, if we have
found one.
a subcommittee,
Well, that stuff makes sense.
is to so that leaves him with himself. I mean, it's ridiculous, it's just ridiculous, but we're gonna do it. And we'll have
Let's get started, guys.
The architect that I got is kind of a.
Thank you.
Does a bunch of
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
Okay?
Okay.
These are contractors that are doing all this. Yeah. And it would have been nice, you know, but it's like.
I'll send out a
I'll
notice.
send you, I mean, and he's done some stuff.
Thank you for coming.
Flea marketing and freebasing.
Or fishing.
Or fishing.
That's what it's not doing drugs.
Anything I needed, they were like, well.
See, that's why he's been so hard up there.
Yeah, if you think of it, and I'll
See that?
probably ask you about it.
Yeah, because I use the
Yeah,
plumbing
but
sub.
that turned out to be just a record. Right?
Sub for my own.
Well,
I mean,
right.
because
Well, I just got to the point where it was like, you know what?
No, but
you
the
could build a whole new
record-
house.
Well,
Yeah.
Then they,
plus there's nothing wrong with
all
it
these
except I
cars.
don't have a,
When
I
the
got
guy
that
say
shed out
13
the
cars
back.
one time, there
I
was
can
one
park a
stated
vehicle
in
in there,
there.
except for that. Everything works.
Okay.
Kind of like the ancient kitchen with everything works.
Yeah.
Robin,
ship
what
is
is,
gone.
help us to understand our purpose this evening.
Our purpose,
Yes, the minute was going, I watched it late.
okay, our purpose is for any kind of, I don't know, major, or there was a committee that was set up, I think, that came out of the planning commission to do work on the sign ordinance that Paul and Jennifer, and then,
Well, there's a staff list of projects.
right,
that we all put our hands in the air for based
Right.
on what our interests were.
right.
And so we weren't,
That's where it started, and then you guys have come up with some amendments and changes and additions to the ordinance. And it's pretty, I mean, in a way, it's pretty significant. In other ways, it's not it's not like changing the whole thing. It's not a new sign ordinance. It's adding and improving and clarifying. And because it's fairly significant, the way the city council has their processes, it would require a work session between the committee, which really is some of the people from the council, and then,
Who's on the committee besides Jennifer and Paul?
well, there used to be other people too.
Okay.
Right, you had
Not
other,
we had,
for real estate, you
we
remember?
had stakeholders.
Stakeholder, yeah.
We had two guys from a sign company. We had a member of the real estate community. We had two members of the business community that happened to be both in the same part of town. We had another small business owner in Highway 9 area. But to be crystal clear about that, their attendance was sporadic. So, they came and expressed interest when it primarily dealt with their part of the business, and the rest of it was staff and a couple of us going over it as we thought. We've heard the community express to us their concerns. We know that we've got a variety of small businesses, and we know that the city has heard of a lot of input from small business on how friendly or not friendly are we with our sign ordinance. So we reread the sign ordinance with that in mind, basically. How do we either shore up things that needed help or soften things that were a prohibitor?
What I got the most complaints about.
Yeah, an obstacle to doing business. And we tried to clarify some things that make it simpler for interpretation.
So, I guess not having seen any of this before, I was just surprised. To me, there's kind of three things here, right? There's amendments, proposed amendments within the existing body of the ordinance. And then there's two new sections that have been added. One for community identification banners and one that as I read it, is only relevant to new developments, right? Where they have to come forward with a sign plan for a new development.
Right.
Okay.
So, and part of the processes of the flow chart is, it's not just a little amendment that I could just take straight to you and then on to council, but it really needed further discussion through a work session.
No, I was surprised, I don't know why, I thought there was going to be more red in the body of the ordinance than what was here, that's all.
No, we went through every single element of the body of the ordinance and said, does this need help or not?
Okay.
And we concluded that it didn't. We spent an inordinate amount of time on a couple of sections to make them as fair and equitable as possible, and other parts we could skim right through, so.
We got some things right off the bat.
Yeah,
So-
that's almost a good sign that there was not as much red as you might have thought.
We weren't trying to redo the whole
No.
ordinance.
Right.
So with the
Nor was
exception,
it
so with the exception of Paul and Jennifer, that obviously were part of this, I mean, do the rest of us, do we want to treat this like we did with the HPC and just deal with the red and ignore all else?
That's what I would suggest.
I'm okay with that.
What I went through, George, in preparation to talk tonight, there were a couple of small catches that I found within the body that are very fixable, or I would like you to hear just a quick discussion on. And then the other things are just things I want to make sure that I discuss on behalf of the committee as to what we were doing, why we were doing it, and certainly answer questions as you guys have them, as you got things you want to bring up, either in black or in red.
So is there anything we need to talk about before we get to page 10?
Yes. On page 3, we didn't ever discuss this, I want to maybe bring it up tonight, which is a temporary sign, means any sign of non-permanent nature. All such signs shall be removed within 3 calendar days after the purpose of which the sign is intended to advertise has been accomplished. I went back and reread that to say, do we really want to say to advertise? Because not all signs are intended to be advertising something. It may just be a purpose of, congratulations.
Communicate,
or,
maybe?
Yeah. So all I said was you could just take out the words to advertise and have it to read, which the sign is intended has been accomplished.
Yeah, I agree.
So just.
Paul, I had a question about that coincidentally. As I read that, my question was, that talks about when it has to be removed. How far in advance can it be set up?
But it's not redlined.
I know,
I don't know.
because we didn't change it, he's just.
Right, and prior
okay,
to,
okay.
well, there are windows, we do define windows when things can be placed.
You mean windows in time?
Yes. That addresses it later.
Okay.
Certain circumstances.
Okay.
And on page 6, what I discovered is the last statement under this section of required. It says, except where specifically not required by the standards of this article, it shall be unlawful for any person to post, display, material change, or erect a sign in the city without first having obtained a sign permit. Notwithstanding, the foregoing signs, which are not visible from a public right-of-way or from neighboring properties, shall not be subject to the standards of this article. We intended to change that with Birmingham Crossroads in mind, knowing that there is significant, if this stays like it is.
As a matter of fact, you did change it later on by adding
You did
visible
change
to
it.
the road.
Page 10.
So this is inconsistent,
Okay.
and not having a chance to measure how we would ensure that it was consistent. My suggestion is that part gets struck, because we do address later that it's the intention of the ordinance to be applied, whether it can be seen or not seen from the street or adjoining properties.
For the entire city.
Yes.
For the Northwest overlay,
Well,
we're going to move all this out to overlay districts eventually, right?
Well, basically, the general part that's not really addressed is what would be in the northwest, and then Birmingham and Crabapple and 9 have their own sign section. So it'd be safe to change this part because it would take care of the whole city.
So you're suggesting starting with the word notwithstanding?
Yes.
The rest of that paragraph? I like that. Boy, I was out at the Crossroads yesterday looking at signs.
Mhm.
I
Horrible.
almost
Yeah, it's
got
horrible.
sick. looking
That's
at
what
it.
actually, one of the reasons I put my hand in the air to do this, because it was so non-compliant with what was intended, what was the spirit of this ordinance in the first place.
What else, Paul?
So, and you were on page 10, George, was your next one? Mine was-
No, 10 was the first red that I saw, that was all.
Oh, okay.
That was whether they're not going to be seen from the road, was the adder there.
Yes. So that was where I found the inconsistency, to page 6.
I hate to complicate things a little bit, but it's really whether or not they can be seen from a public space. Because if I have in the back of my house a sign that can't be seen from any public space, it's really not, shouldn't be regulated. So we really need to say any kind of a public space, public road, public space, any of that. So can we make that distinction?
I'm completely okay with it. Well, as long as. but
How do you
is
define
a,
public space?
Is an internal road on a development
public space.
considered a public space?
Yeah. Any place a public could be without trespassing.
But this would say that if there's nothing between you and the neighbor behind you, you can put whatever you want behind your house, no matter how offensive it is to them.
No, I think that's a public space too, right?
No?
No.
I mean, if your lots back up against each other, then there is no public space.
It's prohibited,
No?
whether or not they can be seen.
But this is from the road.
Whether
Right, and he's just going to change it to public space.
public space, but it says whether or not. So it's, everything is captured there.
Well, then we don't even need that. Just say the following types of sign are prohibited in the city.
True. True.
If that's the
Well, I'm
intent.
willing to let it go because it's a complicated thing to solve, that little point of mine.
Yeah, you're right. If they just say prohibited, they're prohibited.
I mean, whether or not they can be seen,
Well,
I mean, if it's inside my house, is it prohibited? If
well,
it's in my
it's
by the
garage,
way
from
this
your
is written, it
window.
is.
it is.
although I like where you're going, Joe, because it makes it really all-encompassing. However, where I think that there's value to maybe adding public space is it then does, maybe I'm just naive to how we should say it, but it suggests to me that there are areas where the public has to take measure of whether or not this can be seen.
I mean, all these ordinances have to be grounded in health, safety, and welfare of the public.
Right.
And what's in my garage is not the health, safety, or welfare of the public.
Well, if I put balloons in my mailbox, is that within the health, safety, and welfare of the public?
Well, I think so. If they obstruct visibility going down
Well,
the street or distracting or
Okay.
whatever, then that is.
I live at the end of a cul-de-sac and I want to put birthday balloons on my mailbox for my granddaughter.
You better get a sign permit
Well,
first.
Well, that's
it's-
excluded, that balloons aren't permitted at all.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a joke.
Is that really what we want? I mean,
No,
to your
of course
point, if we
not.
really are talking about health, safety, and welfare, we ought to put that qualifier on it and said, to the extent it has a negative impact on health, safety, and welfare. Because then anything in your house is going to be fair game. You can do what you want.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about if it's viewable from a public space, then it can be connected to health, safety, and welfare of the public. If it can't be viewed from a public space, then perhaps it can't be tied to health, safety, and welfare of the
Yeah,
public.
but balloons on my mailbox could certainly be viewed from a public space. I mean, they're in a public space, but they're not impacting anybody's health, safety, and welfare.
Well, they may be. They may be affecting property values. They may be affecting all sorts of things. I mean,
We have a
that's,
phobia. Tons of balloons.
I refuse to accept that balloons on my mailbox for 2 hours during a birthday party are going to negatively impact anybody's property value.
Yeah, but it's like day 5, when they.
And you forgot to
that's
take
it.
them off.
I'm allowed to leave them up for 3 days.
Did I not say it's a joke? Okay? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I've put balloons up on my mailbox. I mean, I have.
You
I
have
do
to.
remove
People would
them.
miss your house.
I remove them after 2 or 3 days.
Tom, let's add that to the extent it affects public safety, whatever the language is.
Health, safety, and welfare. I
Yeah,
think that's-
but that same concept came up, and you were there because it was our first. When we were talking about neon, and we gave the examples of, end around on the rule where you move it back into the store, so it's
Right,
not.
right.
And we had the conversation about that, and I don't remember what the conclusion was, but about visibility.
I mean,
No conclusion.
no, it was out.
But it's
Yeah,
just
but
plain
it's
no.
not being enforced.
Just plain no.
but-
But it was an impact. It was a public impact that was the.
It was still visible by the public.
Yeah, I mean, it exists right now up in Birmingham.
But this
Well,
wouldn't exclude that.
At the
No,
liquor
no,
store.
no.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
at
it's
the
totally
awful
different.
liquor store.
I like adding, Joe, as you suggested, to the
and
extent
they
that it
told guy
affects.
he would have done a
I don't
classy
like
job.
that. I
No,
think that's
we
too
get you.
general. I mean, how are we going to enforce that? Do we have a definition of how it affects the public safety, health, and welfare?
Well,
Want
I
me to
think we
take
have to
that?
make that case
Yeah.
whenever we enforced against that.
Or if they come in for variance, or,
I just can't do a blanket thing and say it's prohibited
Well,
in the
I
city
think the
because
public
these are
needs
legal
space.
items.
Yeah, but I mean, what?
Say public
adding
space
this-
or adjacent residential property.
Say what? Tell me what you're proposing.
That these signs are prohibited when
If-
viewed, if they can be seen from any public space or adjacent.
If they can be
If they
seen.
can be seen from any public space or adjacent residential property.
Okay.
That works for me.
Point, question. I'm a collector of, I'm not, but I have customers that are.
Strictly hypothetical.
In my garage, I have huge 3 and 4 foot signs, Pure Oil and all kinds of.
Old signs.
Old signs.
Residential property.
I would be, anytime my garage door opens, then I'm,
You just have to keep your garage door closed.
yeah, full.
Please keep your garage door closed.
So they don't call us.
Is
I
a
think
sign,
that's the
is a
point.
sign that's not being used as a sign?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
is
'cause we took
Cracker
out the
Barrel
word.
in Milton?
No.
No.
So let's say it is.
It's
So all the signs on the inside of that building have to be removed,
If they're,
because that's a public space.
well, we have separate rules for window signs, so.
No, these aren't window signs, they're mounted all over the inside of the building.
Well, I mean, of course, we don't have purview over what's inside.
But it's a public space.
How's it a public space?
Because you go in the restaurant, right? Is that what you're
that's
saying?
private. It's owned by Cracker Barrel. It's not
But it's
public.
viewed-
Well,
it's
that's
viewed
a
like
good
public.
point, Chris. Yeah.
Those are, but I was going,
So we can-
my point was
Yeah.
under view, using it as public view.
Okay.
And I think.
You can leave it, because it'll
obviously-
never be enforced anyhow.
I would say,
so.
obviously, none of this comes into play unless you're trying to enforce it. And you,
Right,
and you
that's
need
what I'm saying.
something
So-
to have as a foundation to enforce it. If we do say a public space or residential property, if they can be seen.
That's one other thing. Do we want to say seen or visible?
Visible from any public space or adjacent residential
Visible,
properties.
as in, doesn't matter if you can read it, just if you can see it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, 'cause we've had questions about that.
Are we changing that?
Would you restrict it to residential properties as opposed to adjacent properties?
Good point. No, I wouldn't.
Well, it's like the language you took out in 64, 2265, visible from a public right-of-way or from neighboring properties.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that what we
You're
took out
talking about,
before?
yeah, you're just talking about putting it into this other one. You struck it from the other one.
Yeah, it's
Well, the
good.
problem is that there's a lot of signs that are not in the right of way or on
Visible
residential
from
property.
a public right-of-way
So maybe we
Right,
just say.
that's the problem. That's the problem.
Neighboring.
or from neighboring properties. Yeah.
There are signs that we find objectionable that are not visible from a public right of way, but are visible from parking lots and things inside of development that we
Yeah.
find offensive. So we've got to say public spaces and not right of way.
Well, we
Public
can-
space or neighboring property would work for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And I would just keep right of way too. right-of-way, public space, and neighboring property.
Because that's city property, public right of way, or
Okay,
state,
well-
or whatever.
So where are we changing it? Can you read it out again?
Yes, the following types of signs are prohibited in the city if they are visible from a right-of-way,
Where is he?
public space, or neighboring property.
Chasing squirrels.
It's Chris. Sending me messages.
Oh, gosh.
Chris.
He said,
Right-of-way,
he said
public
you guys
space,
should allow,
or
he
neighboring
said you guys
property.
should let me have balloons on my mailbox. God bless you.
Let's see.
All right, moving along.
Okay,
No, before we move on, we're still in that same section. 18, in red. We're still in 2295, right?
Right.
I think you can just say signs attached to fences or walls. You don't need a heading and then.
yeah, I was just gonna, I had the same catch, but not that way. But you, I accomplish what I'm after, would be the truth.
Okay. I also have one question about this section, and how do we feel about political signs?
Ouch.
We can't address a political sign because you can't address content.
I'm not talking about content, I'm talking about, do
Where
they
you can-
fall
where
into
can you
one of
put
these
them,
categories? I mean, they're portable signs, aren't they?
Temporary.
Well, they're
Temporary
specifically
signs.
allowed under standard informational sign.
For a specific period of time.
Right, but that's what I wanted to get at, was the period of time thing. Maybe we deal with that later.
It's
3
not-
days.
I will tell you, that's not addressed in the things.
No, there's another
No,
exception.
we didn't touch that.
It's not in
Oh,
this.
that's specific.
Well, I mean, it's got to be taken out 3 days after whatever the event.
Oh,
right?
better.
3 days
3
after.
days
That's what I thought,
That's
yeah.
why, that's one of the reasons I asked the question about how long before the event can they be put up?
And you're still
I think
compliant.
it says specifically.
And then once it's been, the candidates made their,
The
whatever.
sign-up
Qualifying.
period or whatever.
Qualified, yeah.
Whatever
That
that,
far in advance?
it says.
That's what I
Yeah, you know,
I thought it was 2 weeks ahead of the election.
That's what I thought.
no, it's
Qualifi-
qualifying.
Yeah, it's
Between the date of qualification
national?
of the candidate
Yeah,
or
that's
the
the next week or
referendum
something, when
question
you
and the
can-
final
when they
and
have to file.
election day, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
So if you can start
if they
advertising
sign
from
up
that
next
point
week, they
forward.
can start.
Advertising right
Is that
away.
national?
That's-
Paul, did
no.
you have something else that's not red that we need to know?
What about national?
Oh, you mean national ones,
That's
about
what we get to
qualified?
grid.
There's already
Well,
one
I
up
guess-
for Ron
The
Paul.
next
Just
one
go
was
by
on,
page. Does
15
anybody
was
have
the next
anything
one.
on 12?
I don't
Is that
know.
what, George?
15 was the next one.
That's a good
That's
point.
my next one as well.
Do you hear me?
What about
What
national?
about national? There's already, I know of at least two
National
occasions. Ron Paul
Candidates.
for
Political,
president.
political signage,
It's like a year and a half away.
yeah.
Well, I guess if they've officially announced their candidacy, that qualifies them, right?
Well, and if they're compliant with what the standards
Technically-
would be, you can't.
Technically, the requirement for them is the same as it is here. In order for them to be on a ballot in Georgia, they have to pay a fee and qualify in Georgia. So technically, they aren't qualified until the primary comes along.
So they're,
But if it's again, because you can't regulate content, if it's just a sign that
Temporary.
says Ron
Like
Paul, it's a
somebody's
temporary
yard,
sign,
they can do
it's a
that.
2x2 sign that goes in their yard, and it's only, and it's one.
Up to 3 of them.
Yeah, but it
Or
could-
up to 3, you can have.
But it can only go up.
Well, no, we can't regulate content, so if they
It's
can
not
have it up
content,
all
Yeah,
year.
they can have one up all the time, as long as it's 2 foot by 2 foot
Well, what
standard
did you just say?
information
I thought you just said for.
Well, yeah, well, there's.
Unlimited number
Right.
during qualification to the election.
For
There's an
political.
unlimited number of them.
Yeah, prior to that, there's a limited number?
Yes.
Prior to that, there's a limited
Oh,
number.
okay.
Is it
Yeah,
1 or
it's a-
3?
3 for
For
residential. and one
for residential in one.
3, so they could have 3, yeah.
Not a residential.
Right,
Okay,
Residential, they could have
3.
3.
One.
And it's one, yeah.
okay.
Okay, so the next one,
15, the section that was added, section D, talks about real estate signs. Where is that defined?
That'd be in the front.
I didn't see a definition for real estate sign. Maybe I missed it.
I don't see it there now.
I thought you're not supposed
Jennifer
to
had
say
that
the
stricken.
difference between one kind of sign or another. That's why there's no real estate defined. It's describing a
The
sign.
sign is just material and size. It has nothing to do with content. So, that whole paragraph really doesn't
Yeah.
belong in here. Wow. And we considered that whenever we wrote these sign ordinance, that the real estate people were not happy about it.
Right.
Don't you remember we had
Oh, absolutely,
demonstrations?
and that's
practically?
why
Well-
we took on real estate signs as a topic for the sign ordinance, for this committee to consider, because we know that we want
I
to
think you would have
give
to
them
say
special
that during
consideration.
times of properties are for sale, commercial or
does,
residential
yeah.
properties are for sale, that those properties may have an additional sign.
They have a sign.
May have a sign or an additional sign.
I mean,
We're already
That's-
allowed to have a sign, right? You just got
Temporary.
through saying they could have one sign on a commercial.
Yeah, but like
That
Crooked
was-
Creek, I mean, the real estate sign that the HOA's approved is bigger than 2x2. I mean,
Yeah.
it's on a 4x4
Right, but
post,
you want to let
etc.
them have something bigger than 2x2,
That's the
right?
point. The point
Yeah.
was to allow two different kinds of signs for real estate. One is on Arterial Road and one is all other. The higher, we decided to make it speed sensitive. If it's arterial roads, and we do want to identify a particular speed, but arterial roads implied a higher rate of speed. And as such, the sign would be more difficult to read. So in consideration of our friends in the real estate industry, although Jennifer was not in favor of it, I will tell you,
She's even less in favor now because she's studying physics.
yeah.
She says.
You guys, come on. Why would I make that up? Trust me.
Nobody.
That we, it was implied that it was harder to read, so you wanted to offer a larger sign. So you weren't going to have people slowing down to read it.
But is that a general statement that signs on roads where the speed limit's 45 miles an hour greater, you're allowed a bigger sign?
Well, we were making that allowance only for real estate. So did we get ourselves in trouble by doing
No, I think you can say the same thing, but I think you have to say during times real property is listed for sale or for sale by owner or something like that. Then,
Finish your statement.
right?
And what?
Then,
it? A sign.
Yeah, just say during times that real
a sign
property,
shall be,
An additional sign?
an additional sign shall not exceed 9 square
Or you
feet.
could say,
well, can we call it, it's like we have signs during construction, so can we say signs during the sale or lease of property?
yeah.
Yes.
But my question is it an additional sign in addition to what they're already allowed as a residential or commercial
I
property?
mean, we were not
Yes.
intending
Yes.
to offer them an additional sign.
Oh, you're not? You're just allowing that
Well, like
one
you said, if
sign?
I want 3 Ron Paul signs in my yard plus a for sale sign,
You can do that.
yeah, I should be able to do that.
And if your house happens to be for sale while Ron Paul's running, you can put a 9 square foot Ron Paul sign in your front yard.
Exactly right.
Provided
then have the
it's-
little-
he's on a road that's over 45 miles an hour.
So really, that paragraph that we have
Have the
labeled D
politicians giving out for sale signs.
should be up here under
Vote for Ron Paul!
like B1, like under there, a subparagraph under B, the temporary standard informational sign, where you say during times properties are for lease or sale. Then,
Why would it go under there, though? The
the
sizes
standard
are
temperature.
different.
Huh?
The
I know,
sizes are different.
I understand that, but it is still a
Context.
standard informational sign that we want to be bigger than the.
Defining.
Right, but so is signs during construction.
Yeah, I think
Right.
the-
And that has its own thing.
Right.
Okay, I didn't see that part.
I just
I
put it
just-
there so people can find it.
Yeah.
yeah, it's probably easier to find.
Without calling me.
So how did you word it?
Signs during the sale or lease of property.
So just like you said, like, under A, you got
Property.
signs during construction, signs during for sale or lease.
And then one sign per road frontage during sale or lease, okay. So it's like a title.
Say real property.
Right.
Real property, okay.
Versus fake.
Huh?
Versus personal.
I forgot what that means, yeah.
I knew that.
On sale or lease.
and-
How are you defining where they're allowed? Emma?
Arterials versus,
What is arterial?
it's
Transportation
the
plan.
right of way and the speed, and I left that blank, I have
We
a
have,
list.
we have a
from
list
public
of
Oh,
roads.
so we're not going to list the speed, we're going to list the
We're gonna
roads?
list the roads.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
they're
what the-
categorized, yeah.
Okay.
We intended specifically to list
Does lease also mean rent?
Yes.
Yes.
And the other reason I wanted to bring this up, Angela, is actually a question that goes to our own work, is that we say the sign shall be externally illuminated, it's implying to me that it has to be externally.
Yes, that's the way I read it too.
I did too.
May be.
I would say shall not be internally illuminated.
I mean, that's really what you're trying to get at. You don't want a neon glowing
It can
sign.
be illuminated is what we're suggesting, but we're not mandating that it be illuminated.
Yeah,
Or
but I
I'm
like-
suggesting
I think
that
Tom's
we need to
wording's
consider
better.
whether or not we want it
We
to
want to
be illuminated.
prohibit internal illumination.
Right.
But should it be allowed to be illuminated?
Yeah.
Just prohibit internal and they can
But
illuminate
you can
it.
say,
If the sign is illuminated.
No, just say the
Just
sign
say
may
it shall
not
not
be
be
internally
internally
illuminated.
Yeah, yeah.
allowing you then the option to illuminate or not.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, unless you had anything beforehand, my question is 3 and, well, it's on page 16 and 17. There's an insert number 6 in section 3,
Yeah,
and then number 10 in section 4.
yeah.
The way I read this, that banner is not allowed in AG1. Is that the intent?
It should be listed again.
Well, I didn't see the same language.
It should be in AG1 also.
Yeah, so you need to add that.
So, yeah.
Each
So
sub-
under, so you need to add a 6.
Under AG1. Did I? Yeah, because I put it in apartments and townhomes too, so that should go under the text.
And then within that, I wanted to make sure we read one more thing that says, each subdivision may post one banner, maximum 24 feet. I was saying not to exceed 5 feet tall, or a maximum of 5 feet tall.
Yeah, it's maximum.
Could we be specific on an ending date rather than saying from the beginning of May to mid-June, say from May 1st to June 30th or something, or May 1st to June 15th?
Problem is, not all schools have the same graduation window.
So you're just saying to be pretty broad,
He's
though.
made it broad, so but yeah, I guess start and finish, they wouldn't have the same exposure.
Maybe May 1st to
I'm just trying to
June
be more
15th
precise.
or something.
You're trying to bring a greater confine to it?
No, I'm just trying to
Precise.
define it better. Just saying beginning of May to mid-June, just say May 1st to June 15th or June 30th or whatever.
I'm probably a voice in the wilderness, but I personally hate those signs. I just assume not have them at all.
That's
And I certainly don't want to approve 40 days worth of them.
Just go stick a balloon on one of them.
Yeah.
And then they've got to take it down.
With your person's name on it.
Yeah.
And just leave it flop
You
there.
see a
How
slight
do we
increase
ever
in
get by
balloon
with that?
sales when Georgia is out making it illegal. Well, it is, whether
You
you
give
and I
me
like
a
it or
couple
not,
of six-packs
I like
and
it
some
anymore.
balloons.
It's kind of like a Milton tradition to have them. And I don't
Oh,
think
it's
we-
everywhere.
It's everywhere, yeah.
And I'm not, to me, the 40 days, and Joe just extended it to 60. I mean, I don't object to the advertising of, I think it's a
How
great.
old are your kids?
I'm with you.
No. I mean, it's an.
They're past that.
They're past that. So,
Yeah.
but you've been through it reasonably recently. Mine are 8 and 10. I can only imagine. But I mean, I guess you care a lot. I guess you're really proud, to,
It's a big deal. It's a big
yeah.
deal.
And
Especially
so,
if somebody gets left off.
It's hard for
Yeah.
me to
Just paint it on your car.
That's not.
Well, that's a sign. My car would be a sign because it's on blocks in my front yard.
They can only do
Have
that
you
on.
seen behind the monument sign that said you live there?
They can only
For
do
Curtis,
that.
we can go spray paint it on his bridge.
They can only do that on the RV. On the
No,
RV.
I mean, I just,
I'm so
you
glad you're
know.
finally compliant with the Milton landscaping rules where you finally cleared your land.
If anybody really took a good hard look, I'm sure I'm violating all
All right,
kinds of
move
stuff.
on.
No, so did you just move past that? State your opinion and move past it?
My opinion is it's that I appreciate the fact that everybody graduates at a different time. I think people should have the right to acknowledge that it's a great event. I just object to seeing them up there forever, what seems like forever.
You want them down.
Well, would it make sense to use that window of time, but to drop a parameter on it, no longer than 30 days or something?
Oh, we did.
But then, But I thought it was,
Maximum
but what I
40
was
days.
getting at was Joe's point about pick the early point and the late point. At least you've got a high and a low water mark, but it's, some limited
Well,
time
don't-
within
40
that.
days.
Don't we have that? For a
Why-
maximum of 40 days during the graduation season, starting the beginning.
So why don't we say no
So
earlier
that
than
lets
May
them-
15th
that-
and no later than June 15th?
Well, and that it lets them pick the start, but defines the maximum.
I mean, mid-June would be the 15th. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the, but it would be nice just to
I
say
mean,
it's the
there's only
15th.
45 days between May and mid-June to begin with. If we're going to allow it for 40 days, we're kind of grasping at straws,
All
are
right.
we not, to over 5 days?
No, I was trying to cut it back to 30, May
I
15th
was
to
trying to
June
help you.
15th. I know.
I'm okay with the way,
I mean, if the sign isn't up there the day I graduate, does that invalidate it being up there?
pretty much.
No, it does not.
Depends on if you're a girl or a boy.
All right, move on.
It is very much six-wise.
I give up. All right.
Yeah, we're almost done with this one.
Oh, we haven't even started.
Coach, well, there's not a lot of red edits until the end.
Next one's on 25, Paul, I think.
But we want to keep the maximum of 5 feet, right?
Yes.
From that previous thing, okay.
Your next one was 25, so.
Oh,
Robin, what was
question
that one?
on an earlier section here.
banners.
Oh,
Does
the
that
five.
mean that those banners, I'm going back to something else that you wrote before. Where is it? Does that mean that that banner's got to be framed on 4 sides?
You're fine, no, no, no.
Is it what?
Does it have to be framed on 4 sides?
We didn't discuss that.
You do say the banners have to be framed, so, yeah.
It's going to be a lot for
This is a
them.
banner.
That's a little
and a
much.
sign.
Yeah, I don't think not for the
Banner like that.
graduation.
All banners have to be framed?
That's something.
Where did I read that?
I
You
thought
did read
that
that?
was,
Oh, maybe this is.
I think that's just Highway 9.
I think
Where
it's
is
just
it?
that
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Kind of developments in Highway 9.
I read it too, George.
It's
It's
Highway
Highway
9.
9.
Just highway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's actually where we're going to bump into the biggest issue where we're talking about vertical versus horizontal. And we were trying to give some consideration to the larger multi-tenant developments where there are going to be applications for banners of
6,
some
7, 8
kind. So we
banners at
wanted
one
to
time.
be accommodating without having it become an eyesore.
No, it's not just Highway 9, it's any business, right?
Where are you now?
I'm on page 15 under permitted in all zoning districts. It says each new business shall be allowed a banner 30 consecutive days. All banners mounted on the ground must be supported on all sides by a metal or PVC frame.
It's 15. Go back to the report.
Oh, mine didn't have page.
So it's under restrictions based on location.
Because I put them on. Here, you want
This
mine?
was, yeah,
Here.
this is one of my original ones.
Here, you can have it. If you can keep track, that's fine.
These sections that you added at the end override the first one, right?
That's what I would assume. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things for discussion. Do we want to keep the allowances, or do we want to give them a total allowance and let them decide?
Well, I mean, this says permitted in all zoning districts, and it says banners shall be allowed for a period not exceeding 10 consecutive days.
Oh, you mean like the master signage plan?
No, I'm right here on page 15. It says all zoning districts, it says banners shall be allowed for a period not exceeding 10 consecutive days.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into residential, it says each development may post one banner for 40 days.
That's in addition to that.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and it says that at the top. Any sign not specifically allowed in a zoning district as provided under this section. And so that's specifically allowed in that AG1
Right.
or whatever.
Right. But then does the frame idea that's back in the beginning apply to those banners?
I would say not. Because that banner in those, in the AG1 is specifically allowed in AG1. If it, like you said, if we didn't put, the way I would read it, if you didn't put that sign in AG1 like we just did, then it would have to fall under this banner.
But even with that there, though, Chris, I mean, you're reading the language at the beginning of 2303.
Yeah.
But that 2303 precedes the permitted in all districts. So it's saying, unless otherwise stated, any sign not specifically allowed in a zoning district as provided under this section shall be prohibited in that district. I'm not sure that.
Right, yeah.
Well, the question.
Except as otherwise provided.
Yeah.
But you've got two things that are theoretically in conflict unless we clarify that those things that are permitted in individual districts take precedence over those that are
General.
permitted in all
So
districts.
do we simply just add something parenthetically within the graduation banner that says not required to be framed?
Well, either that or put some precedence language in. I mean, if your intent is that the stuff that's specific to an individual district takes precedence over what's allowed in the event of a conflict, then you can just say that.
The district comes first.
The individual districts come first and the all zoning districts come second.
Okay, so how do you fix it?
So, I mean, the question in this case is, do all ground banners need a frame, right?
Right.
And I think our intention was just the commercial in Highway 9.
Highway 9.
So is really the banners that
Although-
you've got in all zoning districts really intended just to be in commercial?
Well, let me ask Angela another question first. So, but now having posed that question, now gives me reason to think about other instances where we would want to see framed banners. You think about the other multi-tenant.
Pretty much any commercial multifamily.
Yeah, if you've got it at
multi-tenant.
Arnold Mill, or you've got it in Crabapple, or you've got it at Birmingham Crossroads, we want to accomplish the same end result there, which is to not have 120 feet of running banners on the edge of a development.
Or on the fence, or.
You know, so, I don't know if you guys have read it to the extent to comprehend it yet. Our intention was to take those, and rather than have literally a couple 100 feet of running signs, if you were to allow all tenants
To
a
advertise,
banner,
yeah.
we restricted it to no more than 4 per development at each given time. And in that same window, that the banners had to be vertical rather than horizontal, and vertical within that fixed frame. So the fixed frame gets rid of the sagging, drooping,
Can't read them
you
anyway.
know. And then the vertical was intended to be able to, in a multi-tenant development, where the application is probably done by the developer, is that what we thought?
Well, the tenants.
Or it could be the tenant. That a specific area within the development would be defined for those signs.
But
So
is
it's
it
not
true-
like there's a vertical banner here, and then a vertical banner 90 feet down the development, another vertical banner 22 feet
Is
down.
it your intent that that framing requirement apply to the graduation banner?
No.
No.
Let me finish the thought, we're going through other benefits, other parts. So the intention was to have groupings of up to 4 signs on a larger development. So it's all boom right here, and it's not scattered across the development. It was intended with Highway 9 primarily in mind to make it cleaner and a more pleasing presentation of banners, which we find offensive, but we know we need to allow them. So in allowing them, we wanted to create concentrations of them and give the benefit of the beauty that comes from the other parts of the development, the 4-board fence, the landscaping, the shrubbery, et cetera.
And that's the other problem we have with specifically Highway 9. All the new developments are required to have a horse fence. Putting a banner in front of the fence puts it in the right of way. We've now prohibited banners on a fence. So that means the banner has to go behind the fence.
Which is why we also went vertical.
Right. Instead of making an 8-foot tall banner.
Come back to the graduation banner. I have a suggestion, maybe it's an easy way to fix that. Since we basically said that's allowable anywhere, why don't you move it out of the individuals and put it back in the permitted in all zoning districts and just say notwithstanding the foregoing, each subdivision may post one, each residential subdivision can post one banner, blah, 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 blah.
Put it all the way forward to permitted in zoning districts.
Put it at the very end of section 1C.
Only thing there, well, it's permitted in all zoning districts, so that means you can have one in C1 or.
Now, if you said each residential subdivision is, notwithstanding the foregoing, each residential subdivision may pose blah, 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 blah. You're not going to have a residential subdivision in C1.
Right, well, yeah, I'm just saying that conflicts with permitted in all zoning districts.
Whatever.
I mean, I guess you could have it
I mean, you
technically you
can.
could have it in a mix.
Right, and we should.
Okay.
It's not in mix. Mixed use is on, it starts on 19, it's not there.
I didn't put it in mix and I didn't put it in AG1. Yeah. I mean, we can.
Do we have a mobile home park?
Do we what?
We
Have a
do.
mobile
Just
home
the informal one at my house.
Behind
There
the,
is actually, but there's,
bridge.
yeah. No, it's down the street from your
Discovered it
house.
when you cut back the shrubbery?
Yeah.
So in-
Hey, what are all these
People
people
living
living
back
back
here, yeah.
community there?
Hey, what Air Street?
It's my family.
Before we leave the
George,
sign
one,
and the
I'm not
banners,
to, rather
Did we
than
give
put that
consideration-
in the earlier version, why not just add that language to these two provisions, just say notwithstanding anything else in this
Sure, you do that too.
article?
But then it needs to be added to mixed use in AG1 too.
Yeah.
In mobile home park. But we don't really have any mobile.
I don't think we have any.
Well, yeah, but it's in the ordinance.
did we give consideration to the PVC or metal frame on banners being projectiles in windstorms? Because that's a big consideration in signage, is that we get the right foundation on it so that doesn't occur. I'm not, probably PVC is not that dangerous from flying across the street, but a metal might be.
Did we say?
No, I mean,
You said PVC or metal frame.
right, we didn't
Didn't consider
specify
that,
anything
yeah.
about how they're anchored or tied down or anything like that.
I mean, they are by definition temporary signs, are they not? Not to have permanent foundations.
Right.
So you say they can be there for not more than 10 consecutive days
Or
unless the wind speed exceeds
or the
20
first windstorm.
miles an hour.
Yeah.
Whichever comes first.
I just think, we I don't know. I hate to require
Yeah,
something and then
that's right.
it
Quake's
be
less
a
than 6.
issue like that.
Projectile.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there are PVC frames that probably would be appropriate in most, if not all, applications.
So we could just say PVC and mix the metal?
Yeah.
That'd make me feel better.
They use them now. Some of the Montanas does.
PVC?
I've seen PVC
Yeah, it's
frames.
common.
I've seen metal bars.
PVC one way, place in Windward does, they have rebar in the ground, three rebar poles and PVC pipe.
On top.
We're gonna slip into that, so it's about 3 foot.
It's for sure gonna be a kite in the windstorm.
Well, the wind's not gonna but I don't think the signs wanna go off of those, be blown off of those, off that rebar. It's got the height to it. Another thing is that when you put the slits.
They put holes,
slit. Yeah, you're right, the half inch splits, I've seen that in the banners too.
But see, we don't go to that definition to require that.
I don't like slits in the sign. It's crazy. I don't think it works, but requiring PVC and not metal would make me feel better.
That's fine.
So my understanding then that all banners,
Along Highway 9.
No, all over.
No.
All over.
All over.
Commercial.
Except for graduation.
Except for
Oh,
graduation.
okay.
except for graduation. So the Milton Roundup sign coming October, whatever, is 6 foot long,
They got a permit.
3 foot high. So they got a permit.
They can do whatever they want
Yeah,
to.
exactly.
So that exempts it.
Well, they're exempt because it's a city function.
We shouldn't exempt ourselves from our own rules. We need to be compliant with our own.
Well, I'm just making.
Well, I think once this passes,
What's
I
good?
think we will be
Well,
compliant
I'm
with our own
afraid somebody
rules.
say, yeah, you make these rules and then you go out and.
No, we don't do that.
That was, and I think about them because at the corner of Windward and Highway 9, it's in Alpharetta. I mean, that corner has a vinyl sign there.
all the time on the
Every
drug-
week
on the
or
drugstore,
something.
on the
Oh, yeah,
drugstore.
the new
On the
one's
drugstore
lovely.
corner.
For Alpharetta, we don't put our
No,
stuff
I
up there.
I know, no, no.
Yeah, oh,
I'm
yeah.
just
No,
saying.
we put ours on the Walmart side.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's
But we
okay.
don't leave it up all the
No,
time.
it's it.
Speaking of that, not to digress, but the dance studio that's at the corner of Cogburn and what used to be
Windward.
Henderson.
Yeah.
Did they get approval for that?
Yeah, it was already zoned in Fulton County as O&I in the existing structure, and dance studios are permitted use in O&I.
Yeah, but they still have to comply with our sign ordinance.
Right, I mean, their sign, they got a sign
Permit for the
permit,
sign.
yeah.
That's within the square footage? Wow. It's a monument sign.
Is it
Had to be a
32 square
monument.
feet?
Okay. Awful.
It's all those banners she puts up, it's even
Okay,
worse.
so we're striking metal and PVC is what we're going to designate as the parameters.
On page 25.
So are we keeping the graduation banners per district, or are we adding it to in all zoning districts?
I like the way George said it, in all zoning districts. It's
I
where it
mean,
belongs.
if you put it in all the zoning districts, you only have to put it in once, otherwise you gotta put it in 4 times. I mean, Joe's right, you can put the notwithstanding in either location, but you're gonna
And you have to
put it in-
specify that it's residential
Yeah,
properties.
right.
Okay.
25.
Hang on a second.
When we talk about multi-tenant developments in here, are we talking about multi-tenant commercial developments or multi-tenant developments, period?
Multi-tenant commercial.
Should we not say that then? I mean, an apartment building's a multi-tenant development, isn't it? I don't think we want each tenant in an apartment building to have a 24 square foot banner.
So where are you, George? 125?
See?
Yeah.
Actually,
See?
you know, apartments are considered commercial buildings.
Okay.
So do you want them to have multi-tenant signs?
No, I'm saying, I thought what we meant is multi-tenant commercial or we're talking about like
Multi-tenant
assemblers
retail?
place.
Retail and office?
Yeah.
Retail and office?
Some qualifier that takes apartments out of the
Yeah,
picture.
but commercial wouldn't do that necessarily.
Okay.
So
Retail
retail.
and office, institutional.
So then we have to add that to B and C too.
I mean, at the very end of that, when it says no more than 4 ground-mounted banners may be displayed, what is a lot? What's the definition of a lot?
Platted lot?
How many platted lots are in Semblers development?
2.
A couple more than that now.
They're gonna subdivide
They're
by.
They have to sell that, all those
But when
outparcels.
they bought that was a combination of more than one parcel, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, it was, yeah. I mean, I think there were 2, because there was the first zoning and then the second
But even
zoning.
within that, wasn't there more than one parcel within each of those zonings?
The only one I could think of is maybe where they originally wanted the gas station. I think that might have been a
Okay.
little slice
just-
off, but.
So would this,
Lot's just not a defined
would
term.
development be a better word there instead of lot?
I don't know.
Well, when we thought about Semba, I thought about them as two lots, remembering that it was 2 separate.
But now, but actually they're gonna subdivide by
So we need a better
D.
definition, so we should say by, well, it would be more prohibitive unless Sembler already has a variance that's been granted to them within their, Sembler was pretty good at what they wanted when they came before.
Yeah, they got a lot, they have variances.
They got variances, so their variances, they already addressed that, so
Oh, we used to have
we can
like.
take Sembler out of the equation and just say other developments.
We used to have more than that.
With the whole length of Semblers.
Yeah.
No,
Do we want to think about it as as each
Gotta be
development?
half a mile.
I'm okay with a mile. Because development probably is going to be the greater entity.
Just
You could say zone development.
Yeah.
I mean, are you trying to eliminate, because when they become, let's say across the street where Aldi's is, that there are defined lots that they're they're outlots, they're lots. So you're saying, let's say where all these is, that's called,
A
what it's
single,
called.
yeah, zone development, yeah.
That, do you want,
NTB is a lot, Aldi's, that
is a lot, and there's a couple
The
more
bank would
coming
be a
on.
lot.
Okay. The intention
So
was to
your
address it
intention
as the larger
is,
entity.
you want it as the one development. So it would be the zoning, it's almost like you have to go back to define it as the zoning case, not as the zoning parcel, not as a lot or a, I don't know.
Can we
Develop,
capture it
because
all?
development, you
Oh, it
know,
doesn't work.
I think development works, but it's not as liberal as zoning parcel.
So if we say zoned development?
Zone development. We would still consider similar as two different zonings.
correct, they could have up
Therefore,
to
two
two
different
because two
zoning
zonings.
And they may have already,
Even though-
in their variances, asked for more. So
And they
so
know that.
similar is a good example if you're talking about it as two. It may not, if you get into particulars of what their.
So that takes away the rights of, let's say,
So
let's
think of the
go,
Aldi side instead. If there are multiple lots to that, the intention was to think of them as one development. Do we capture that by saying zone?
so are we saying that we
I'd say
don't want
zone
those individual
development.
businesses to have more than 4 for the whole development? That's what
Right.
you're saying?
Right.
It says each
Or in-
individual business is allowed to put
Oh.
one on their building. This is for the.
You can still have it on the building, but if the building, if they're asking for something other than their
Banners
building,
can't be on buildings.
they have to.
Yeah, they
It
can.
says each tenant's allowed one banner.
They can
banner
be on
placed on the
buildings.
storefront or wall space of the business.
I saw earlier in here that they weren't allowed on buildings.
I think above a certain place, I mean, they can't be like above the,
Wall signs, no. Somewhere in here.
Wall signs can't cover architectural features. Can be on the roof.
But I mean, if we think of similar as two, the way I read
remember
this,
that
you could have a banner on every storefront in there and 8 banners out on Highway 9.
Theoretically.
I mean, at max.
Or did it say in lieu of the banner on the building?
It doesn't say that.
Yeah, I remember we talked about it specifically, George, because the internal ones, they were saying they're not, once you're internal to the development, are they going to want to have that? They were saying we weren't going to preclude them from doing that, because if I've got a big grand opening going on, and I can't, because of the current banners that have been approved, get mine into the one of the 4 that are on the street frontage,
Right.
I should still be allowed to
Still
have
have your
my
banner.
banner internal to the development on my building, as long as I can comply with the requirements of it being mounted on my building. So yes, you could have multiple banners inside the development, which wouldn't necessarily be seen from the road, because the intention was to provide them more visibility from the road, but limit the number, limit their placement, require them to be vertical, and require them to be framed.
Okay, that was, okay.
And require them to be in a specific location identified for that development in concert with the application of the city. So they're not just going to be happenstance, it'll be for a specific area on the development. You know, use the Aldi one, for example, it's easier than the Assembler right now. If anybody comes forward and wants a banner, the city's going to decide in concert with the applicant, what the best location is for the banners at that time, and once it's established, that's where the vertical banners will go, up to 4 at any given time. Is that said correctly?
Is that C replacing C? Or should that be a
Yes.
separate?
Well, that would be D.
D.
So everything, this will be D.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll capture
So
it.
you'll capture it.
Yeah, we'll get them.
Okay, so does that work for everybody on that bullet point? There's some other stuff I want to get back to.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Is it an administrative variance? Did we ever decide that?
I don't think we decided. It just, they're gonna have a fit if I make them wait a month.
If you what?
If I make a tenant wait a month to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals to decide on a variance for this ground banner.
I would say make it an administrative variance. I mean,
Well,
you still got the 10-day limitation on it
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, that's kind of where we were. To Angela's point, you want to be compliant with the business. Most of them aren't going to be thinking about it that far in advance. They're going to think, oh my God, I need a banner. They don't want to have to wait 30 days.
Right.
But that's outside of what we have historically required them to do. So by allowing an administrative variance, that's I think it's okay.
Yeah, me too.
I do too.
Can we talk just for a minute about the next one? Robin said something before I wanted to test it. If we think about the Aldi side of the street, is the definition of an out parcel?
Like when there's a zoning, if you saw like one whole piece of property, and then, let's say, at the time of zoning, they cut out squares of like 1 acre, well, half-acre parcels. And then in the zoning, it calls out the total square, this parcel with this parcel and then 3 out parcels. So you've already defined it
Like Walmart.
like Walmart, because they're also providing landscape strips, as though it is a separate property
So
owner.
NTD would be considered an out parcel?
Right.
Yeah.
So across the street to Sembler, are all of those buildings that are away from Target and everything else considered out parcels?
They're not.
So there's
That's
no
not-
out parcels in there?
Not right now.
There were no out parcels. Now,
In
out
some-
parcel comes with its own sign, so don't forget that.
Right.
But Sembler can, just by deeding, they can sell off those individual buildings.
And they become out parcels?
Well, in one sense, they become out parcels, but not by definition. So if Sembler sells off, say, one of those buildings, that building doesn't come in here and get its own pole sign or its own monument sign.
Okay. That's what I was getting at,
Yeah.
because this says each out parcel is entitled to one monument sign.
Right, if it's a true out parcel from the zoning get-go, like at Aldi's,
Okay.
there's
And so
some.
I really encourage you to always, on these big commercial things, always specify the number of out parcels, or no out parcels.
Right.
Because otherwise, they'll split them up and then come in here and want
Okay.
signs for them.
Because I was thinking the service station was an out partial.
The service station where?
Or the potential
At
service.
Bethany?
Potential.
I think in the
Came before us,
end, yeah.
The one at
Was an
Bethany
out-
Highway 9?
No,
You
no,
mean-
not
no,
Bethany.
behind
Oh, you mean the
Kohl's.
one that was going to be at the other assembly?
That was an out partial.
Okay.
I think if they knew that they were going to do it, they probably would have asked for it from the beginning, but when they saw the writing on the wall.
Okay, is that fixed 15 for everybody?
Just 2 minor things. The second bullet, the banner shall be placed in the storefront wall space of the, I would rather say tenant business rather than subject business. And the next bullet point, instead of saying not visible from the road, just say, replace that phrase with the word impracticable. So if a building location renders installation on the wall impracticable for whatever reason, a variance may be permitted.
So if the wall space they have is too small for the size sign they're allowed, does that make it impracticable?
Yes.
Okay.
Or the architectural design of the storefront.
Right.
That's going to open you up to a lot more ground banners, because everybody's going to say it.
Well, you don't have to give them a variance.
Well, yes, but I'm just saying, that's going to be the argument.
Yeah, our intention was not to encourage ground banners. Our intention was to discourage them. We wanted to allow for them in a multi-tenant situation. Otherwise, throughout the city, we would rather they end up on the building. So, I'm just playing devil's advocate. So, is that accomplishment? You're providing more flexibility than we intended.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be realistic. If you're just saying, if it's not visible for the road, then they get a variance, but what if there's some other reason? I mean, what we're trying to do is provide for a business that, for whatever reason, they're not in their control, they can't have that banner.
That's fine.
I guess that's reasonable.
Everybody's going to have a reason to make it impractical. So.
Whereas that defined it as one reason, if you can't see it from the road.
I think they would all prefer a ground banner.
Well, what we can do, actually, then, Joe, is to your point, is not change it. And if they can come before the city and demonstrate that hardship, then they can be granted a variance.
I don't know, maybe it's just me, but and I'm focusing maybe too much on Sembler, but if I think of any of those stores in Sembler, and I had a choice between a ground banner and something up on the wall, I'd put it up on the wall.
Amen.
No, not necessarily.
Why would I want it on the
Because
ground?
people can't see it if you're on the back
If you're on the
row.
back,
Put it up.
yeah.
They want to put it up front where the fence
Yeah,
is.
and put it out by the street.
Yeah, because that's so far deep on the property.
And it's okay if you're a mattress firm, but it's not mattress firm.
Everybody else.
It's okay if you're what?
If you're a mattress firm on the front,
Oh, okay.
yeah. but you're like hundreds of yards away.
So
Nobody's
you're-
gonna
Well,
read it.
maybe I'm missing the point. I mean, let's take Target as an example. I mean, if Target wanted to put a banner up, wouldn't they rather put it up on the wall than on the ground?
I would
They're going to
say-
put it up front by the fence.
Well, okay, so that gets to my point. I'm assuming, when I read this, I assumed that their choice was to put it on the ground at their location or up on the wall at their location. You're saying they have the choice.
They
Huh?
can only, in a multi-tenant
Same thing.
development, the objective is to have it stay on the wall of the building.
Right.
Preference number one.
In other, in a
But
multi-tenant,
if now understanding what you mean, then I don't agree with what Joe suggested either, because if it's impracticable for them to have it, that means they're all gonna be up front
yes,
theoretically.
that was our point. So our objective was to say.
I thought it was just
it's
up here or
not-
down here,
It's
that's
not inappropriate for them to ask for consideration to have it brought forward to the street. But it's not necessarily a given that they get it on the street. It's intended to be a banner that's hung on their building. Other than hanging on the building, if it's in a multi-tenant development, there's 4 allowed. To your point, if there are physical features to the building that would give them reason to have it on the street, they can come before the city and get a variance to allow it on the street. And I think that was our intention. Was to-
Under what provision?
that it's impracticable to hang it on their building because of the
That's not the
structural.
way it's written.
But where's that provided for?
The variance, you mean, the
Yeah.
administrative variance? It's under the variance section in another part of the ordinance.
It would be an administrative variance?
Yeah.
That's what we just said.
Then you'd have to do another text amendment to amend it to allow for there has to be a provision for the administrative.
I don't like administrative variances for that personally.
Right, because you're the director and you don't want to
Because
be.
it puts me in a really hot seat.
I'm just thinking about, and I understand what you're saying about, all the signs and broadening the reasons for variance, but I mean, it just seems so discriminatory. I'm in one location, it's on the side, and you can't see my sign for the street, boom, I get to go in.
But that was the
and apply
choice
for-
you made when you took that parcel.
But still, yeah, but that gives me a leg up over my next door neighbor, who sign would be visible, except for the fact
He
that.
paid a discounted price for that property because it was not in as good a location, but has better advertising opportunities.
It just doesn't seem to make
Yeah.
a whole lot of sense that this guy
Right.
gets to do it and this guy doesn't, only
Right.
because there's 2 different reasons why they can't use the sign.
But I guess remember, the overriding approach to what we're doing with the ordinance was to take what has been an unruly situation with the city as to all different sizes, shapes, and colors of banners in all different locations, and to try to bring some containment to that. And to give some hard and fast rules where it can provide for an accommodation to somebody who's been put at a disadvantage for whatever the reason might be. And then allow for a variance to be granted for other extraordinary circumstances to be weighed. So the idea was to bring a tighter control, but still provide consideration. So I think this accomplishes that. It doesn't preclude your example to come forward. It just doesn't make it really easy.
But Paul, if and maybe I'm missing the point, but if the objective is, if you're gonna put it on the ground, we want them to be in the front. If that's part of the objective,
Well, I'm not suggesting it has to be in the front. We're saying that the city and the applicant will consider the appropriate location where we'll get the greatest visibility. It may be on a corner, it may be 60 feet down the road, it may be,
but I guess what I'm saying is if I can put it on the wall without a variance, and to Joe's point, maybe I've got, architectural features, or my wall is too narrow.
All windows.
Do I
well, it's
need?
not too narrow. There's a maximum of X number of square feet.
No, I'm saying the
Building-
wall's too narrow for me to mount the
Physically.
sign, is what
Right,
I'm
but
saying.
I mean, you're suggesting you have to have a 24-foot sign. I'm saying maybe
No.
your wall only accommodates a 60.
No, let me finish my thought. All I'm saying is if that were the case, do I care if that guy drops the sign down on the ground at his location?
Yes. Because we're trying to limit the number of ground signs.
But I thought you were only trying to limit the number that are out on the street frontage. You're trying to limit them throughout?
All the above, yeah.
Okay.
And, just again, to make the point that I was making back to you is, just because you can't fit a 24 square foot sign on your wall does not necessarily mean you get a variance. If your sign, if your wall accommodates a 16 square foot sign, that may be assessed by the city as entirely appropriate to be competitive with your advertising.
I mean, I could make an argument that, the wall of my building runs from the sidewalk to the roof, right? So I can put it on the wall at the ground level and be okay as long as it's mounted on the wall and not stuck in the ground. Okay.
Yeah. And we're not going to be able to think of every variable, but.
No, I know. I just was, I didn't appreciate the fact that you were trying to get all the signs towards the front of the property and not.
We're trying to get them on the wall.
We're trying to get them, trying to stop the proliferation, but still accommodate examples where it's fair and justifiable to bring them to the front.
I don't like the administrative variance, unless you can give me standards in which to grant
Right.
that. Variances play out in a public arena where the public
Yeah.
speaks, and it's just not a good idea to do that at
We
staff level.
left it as a question mark for that reason. To Angela's point, if you've got somebody who's coming before you and it's going to take 30 more days to get the sign up, is that a fair requirement to subject the business owner to? And you're a small business owner, would you think 30 days would be reasonable?
30 days was too long.
I agree 30 days is a long time, but it's just really not workable as an administrative variance without public input, I don't think.
Well, I don't have a dog in the hunt. I don't have a sensitivity that I need to have to shoot the person who developed the administrative variance, nor am I a small business owner.
Joe, you said, you nodded your head and you said 30 days is too long. You mean that's too long to wait?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so too.
I mean, for now, for administrative, well, minor
Wait a minute.
variance, I guess, we're
Who
requiring.
has a sale that they need a banner, that didn't plan this 30 days in advance?
That you'd be surprised. I've had people
It
say.
happens all the time.
Every rug company in the world has a constant sale on.
Yes.
They don't count.
Tom, it happens all the time.
I've had-
We
yeah.
get promotions. Some distributor will come to us with a promotion, and it's 2 weeks hence or 3 weeks hence or whatever it is, and we don't know about it. I mean, it happens every month.
Coca-Cola will beat Pepsi, and then Coke will see it, and 2 weeks later, they want the banner because they got the Super Bowl, it's basically grocery and drug. It's constant.
I've had them say, oh, that's, when we were trying to enforce the one at a time, oh, I can't wait that long, I'm just going to put it up.
Tom, you can advocate, can't you? Because you're not going to be the one.
I'm not going to be the one doing it.
No, but most,
I guarantee you this
and
is
to
not
your
a
point,
good
most
situation
will
for any
anyhow.
staff.
I mean,
No, I
Coke's
understand.
going to come out and put it up. The good news is, most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, they'll put it in the front on a wall with cord or something, so you don't have the problem. They'll fit right into your program, but they're not going to come before because it's only going to be for a weekend or.
This doesn't preclude one tenant from putting it on the wall of somebody else's space, right? I mean, assuming the other tenant approves it, right?
They let them, yeah. Now, for administrative variance, I guess it's the minor variance or whichever one, but they have to get, like, for this. what is
Well,
that
you
for
can do
that
it
one?
just straight off the 1 foot or
Right.
less, but then if it's 10%, but that's to a specific feet, and that is administrative variance. And we do actually, we started sending out adjacent
That's
property
it,
owners.
yeah, I send out letters. I mean, would that be, you wait a week maybe for me to send out letters and?
Because that's what Lynn, we started to do, which I think actually Fulton County did too, but.
I mean, you just have to put yourself in my position. When
Well,
somebody
I know.
comes whining to you
Oh.
about, it's graduation, it's my daughter, it's blah, 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 and next thing you know, I don't really have any guidelines to go by.
Well, and I think what's going to
I'm a
happen.
happy day or I'm a bad day.
You don't need one tenant, just say no.
Is
Yeah, that's
Just-
exactly what I would do.
because of the shortness in time,
That way you can ensure
Just
consistency.
Just leave it out altogether.
because it's going to be such a short period of time in most cases.
By the time you get around
By the
to
time
it.
they get around it, things going to be over, so they'll do it anyhow, so we
All right,
we
Tom,
can't
you
put any
was-
teeth
Especially
into it.
since we've got so many banners being approved right now. I guess I have a bigger concern about the number of banners that I see proliferating out there in the community.
Well, this is only in multi-tenant
Well, I mean,
retail.
We've talked about banners everywhere so far tonight. Four in a.
No, but the administrative variance is only in multi-tenant retail.
Which is where most of the problems are.
So just say no.
I mean, whatever you want, but I'm just saying.
Really?
So let me-
Whoa. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, multi-tenant, whether it's a strip mall or whether it's Sembler or whether it's whatever. That's where a lot of the.
Most of them are vacant. How in the whole
No, they aren't.
thing can-
Yeah, they're not that much vacant. That you're looking at Alpharetta, okay? Alpharetta's
No,
the
I'm
one
not.
with all the empty. We have some, but there's.
There's
not too bad.
132. I can tell you right now, on Highway 9.
I don't think there's 132
I'll-
now.
Two of which are recently vacated rehab
That's right. That's my last
Yeah,
survey.
that seems way high to me.
One.
I don't think, I
Okay,
really.
what you're
I don't
not
think
looking at is you're looking at a building, but there's
there's vacant.
18 places in that building in the strip center. That's not one building. It's 18
No, I understand that.
available.
I understand that.
Available leases.
Companies will allow you to put your banner on an.
Anyway.
So I have
Wait till all those are filmed.
You say Birmingham's almost empty, but I agree with you.
I have a hypothetical for you, Paul.
Do you allow that?
I have a hypothetical for you.
Content is neutral.
Right. So, but it's about placement. It's about entitlement to that.
If that, where it's placed is entitled to a sign,
Then they can
it gets a sign regardless whether it advertises that property or the property across the street or the property in the next
6
city.
miles down the street.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Well,
Let's say it's Christmas time, and the city wants to advertise the tree lighting and put a banner on the corner where the tree is, which is part of Sembler. Does that count as one of their four?
I don't know. I would say yes.
Okay. Keep that in mind.
It does.
And it's got to be framed.
Yeah, you.
It's gotta be
When they-
Can't be internally.
Would you like that tree?
And it can only be up for 10 days.
That's Parks and Rec.
Up to 40 days.
Up to 40.
No, actually, up to 40 days. You can, we fought about it, not fought, we had a spirited conversation about it, how,
Well, this doesn't say, it says, as stated in section blank.
well, it is stated earlier. Remember, where was
Yeah,
it?
it's 10 days.
X number of days, maximum of 40 days per year.
Yeah, but only 10 consecutive.
So you can actually, we changed that. Where-
10 days at a time, up to 40 days in a year.
You can have your 40 days consecutive. Plus a 30-day grand opening.
Grand opening is tree lighting, I guess, is a grand opening.
All right, so that was
26.
20, yeah, 26. You know, which question, George? I'll do it that way.
I didn't have a question, I'm just saying that was the next red.
Oh, next, so that's allowing for what's happened, the city is now approving. The city is now approving 1 4-square-foot neon or LED sign indicating whether the business is open or closed. Can we say open or closed? Because we did, we can't
I mean,
regulate
it could be a
time.
thumbs up, it could be,
Can we say indicating only whether the business is open or closed? That's not content neutral.
No, it isn't.
Suggesting that only can be allowable? I like that.
You can't.
Yeah, because it's saying what it is.
yeah, I mean, it can be, it can be a beer
Yeah.
sign, it can be,
I thought it was for the sole purpose of indicating whether they were open or closed.
but we can't say this must say open or closed. It can be a beer sign, it can be a thumbs up, it can be a jalapeno.
So
it
their
can-
beer sign being turned on implies they're open.
That's how they want to use it.
I hate that word.
We can't, we can't make them say
What we're
open or
saying.
closed.
Oh, I see what
But-
you're saying.
This was not intended for the entire city, right? Did the Birmingham,
Highway 9.
this is Highway 90. So my favorite little liquor store lady with her neon.
Yeah, well,
open sign,
she needs to get rid of it.
4 feet interior to the building.
How is it interior?
Mounted to her cashier counter.
Well, if we
A
can't
high
see
style
it,
and liquor store, huh?
if we can't see it.
No, you can see it. She's.
Yeah, she's
kind of
skirted
beat
the
us in
law.
Several different,
How many does she have?
Pardon?
How many?
I mean,
How many?
Neon
Neon.
signs.
one neon sign
Okay.
that says open.
And it doesn't blink or flash or anything.
No, but it's in Birmingham,
Right.
which specifically prohibits neon.
They overlaid it.
Yeah. So she can't have that sign.
Well, that's got nothing to do with this section we just read, though.
Yeah, he was just making a
Is it
point.
5 feet
This,
from the window?
this section is only for Highway 9.
He's become obsessed with the.
Yes, I noticed that.
Like whatever topic
But if
we're
I'm
on.
her, I'm arguing it's
She
not a
doesn't even
window
know her
sign.
name.
It's not even my window.
Kind of like the RVs on Highway 9.
Hopewell Road. Hang on, I have a note to myself. It also says see page 39.
Somebody passed the chocolate chip.
Oh, which is Birmingham. Which prohibits
I need a little
exposed
chocolate.
neon and neon prohibited period.
I don't know how you're doing with that open place.
So
Well,
she's
she's
down.
on it, though.
She's toast no matter what.
You've allowed four.
Yeah, I mean,
Neon.
Birmingham and Crabapple just prohibit them.
She's toast. I mean, that's just not.
She's a lovely lady.
She is nice.
She's got
She's a nice gal.
She's just got, I mean,
I think 2 foot by 2 foot.
my heart goes out to her because she's a small business owner trying to make it on her own. But she's still got to follow the rules.
Especially a neon sign.
So Mr. Side, of course, is Wine and Spirits. This is the Spirits lady at the corner of Birmingham. and
The liquor store at Birmingham by the gas station. The Birmingham
It's in
corner,
the Texaco gas station.
Okay,
on the northwest corner.
that's where I wasn't following you. What's the issue with that one?
She's got a neon open sign.
Okay.
It's inside the store, mounted to her cashier's counter. But it's a
Jennifer,
neon-
don't you
it's
think
a
you've had
neon-
enough of those?
Shut up.
But it's a neon sign, and it's gotta go away. This is bad.
Were you guys talking about the size of the neon sign? Because I think what the amendment that was made the last time was a smaller size. I thought.
Yeah, I think 4 square feet's too large.
I think it's like 1.5 or something.
Well, it needs, whatever it is.
Well, that's
Match. I mean,
We'll match
they're
it.
trying to-
It's smaller than the 2 by 2.
So now then, that woman's neon sign is okay, as long as.
No.
No, it isn't.
This
That
is
was
just
only in Highway 9.
This is on Highway 9, you're talking about somewhere off of
On
Highway 9.
Birmingham, you know, the gas station, the old gas station by the Vice store.
Shell station.
There's an old station that sits in the,
Because I was just up there,
Northeast corner.
yeah.
Where the
Northwest.
Vice's store is. The gas station's a little bit down the swale.
Before you get to the Shell station?
no, it is in the shell.
Oh, in the Shell.
There was an
station.
out,
It's where the dry
Right
cleaner
hand.
used to be, and that it closed down, and then.
We did just give her a notice of violation about all her signs, so,
Including the neon sign.
I suppose, I didn't look at it, and, we'll go back and check it out.
If you would, that'd be great.
She should have taken down all of her signs in the windows, which
Yeah.
I'm sure she did.
Right.
But are you
I
saying,
think-
then she moved her open sign into her?
it was already at the
Why
cashier's
when she goes
desk.
out of business and homeless?
It's a lot of homes.
I've had a problem
Have
with
the
it.
sign's been removed.
It's a neon
Yeah.
sign that you've seen
I
from-
said when she goes out of
It's a
business
neon,
and becomes
well,
homeless.
it's a neon
how
sign
bad
and
is Paul
it's
gonna feel?
within 5 feet of the,
Did we put that like within 5 feet of a window or something?
For Birmingham.
So it is within
Yeah.
5 feet.
Yeah.
If she had moved it on her back
If
wall,
I
then
lived
it
across
would
the
not
street
be
from it, it kept
prohibited.
me up at night.
Right.
Maybe
She's also
We'll
got-
double
I
check.
she
drive
does
by
have,
it like once every month.
alcohol.
Right.
Because we just wrote up both Shell stations, the one there and the one at Crab Apple as well. And they all make their signs in.
Is that right? That's great.
We moved, if I remember right, at one point, a couple of years ago, we moved all of the sign stuff out of the overlays into the sign ordinance.
Correct, but we still have it separated.
No.
Yeah.
So if I look at Birmingham in here, that's where I was headed. If I look at Birmingham in here, it starts on page 34. Yeah, 34. Where is the sign that Paul's talking about prohibited?
Underneath, on page 39, George.
39. Prohibited sign types.
Underneath the chart.
So you're talking about the distance from the window there?
And she can't have an exposed neon
That's
sign,
on
nor
the
can she,
page
nor,
38.
and then in the last sentence, neon
Oh, yeah.
prohibited.
Neon's prohibited everywhere, so even that one is prohibited. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Except for now for Highway 9. It's
Except for
not
Highway 9 where you're going to allow one.
Right.
At some square footage.
Right, I think it was like 1.5 by whatever. Because Chris actually looked up on the internet what the standard, what everybody buys nowadays. There's a certain size that it is. And
Yeah, they're all the same thing.
yeah.
Does that capture it, George?
I'm still, no, I think it does. Let's, for the sake of argument, say that there's a neon sign inside the building that's not visible outside.
Then you can have it if it's not visible outside.
And so that's where I'm struggling with this last sentence.
Well, on page 38, 8, it says anything within 5 feet is considered a window sign.
Yeah, but this D doesn't talk about window signs. It's
Yeah, it
talking
just says
about
prohibited
prohibited sign
signs.
types.
Well, window signs are prohibited, I think.
Yeah, temporary window signs.
Well, it
I know,
says
but
signs,
I'm saying
right
signs
here it
placed
just
within
says
5
neon.
feet
The
of an
point that
exterior
you-
window.
The point that you pointed out, Paul, the very last sentence says neon is prohibited.
But there are exceptions.
And what are those exceptions?
Well, there aren't any.
There aren't
Yeah.
any.
Not in
Not in
Birmingham.
Birmingham.
Not even if it's visible, not visible from the street.
Well, I mean, yeah, if
That's what
if she has a sign on her back wall and you can't see it from the street, she can have it.
But you can see her signs from the
Okay, I
street.
understand that,
Come-
but there could be.
How does this allow her to have it on the back wall if you can't see it from the street?
It really doesn't.
That's my
In her
There's
question.
just silent to that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No, it says prohibited sign types, period. It doesn't say inside, outside, anything else. It says
Well, that was the intention
Most
of
of them,
Birmingham.
like
was
there
to
are
prohibit
neon signs that
neon
are
or
exposed. A lot
signs
of the
visible
liquor
from
and
the
beer
street
signs are
other than
exposed
the
neon,
sign
just the
for
tubing without
the-
anything covering it.
The business name.
That's exposed.
Yeah, we were
A lot of
holding
times they'll
Birmingham to
channel
a
it.
higher
No,
standard.
No,
actually cover it
We
in
I
parts
understand.
too.
No, I understand, but I'm
Most of the neon you
I'm
can
saying,
It's not captured
let's
in
for the
the
sake of
sign.
argument, say that, you know, it's a beer sign over a bar that is over in the side and you can't see it from the street.
Then they can have
They
it.
can have it.
Well, this doesn't say that. This
It
says
says it's
neon is prohibited.
Well, I think it's assumed that that's meant external.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I
I'm
think.
okay with that, because if somehow you want to enforce it, you can.
It's all up to interpretation,
We
right?
wouldn't choose to.
Okay.
We wouldn't choose to, but.
Wait a minute, we can't do that.
We should clear it up right here. If that's gonna be, we should clear that up.
Put it external.
And if it's okay, as long as it's not visible from outside the building, then let's say that.
Well, it says we have signs placed within 5 feet of an exterior window with the intent of being viewed by
And-
those outside the building.
And that's okay as long as you don't put that thing at the end that says neon is prohibited.
Well, if it's neon, but it doesn't fit that piece, it's fine. And I think that's.
I would tell you,
That's
I'd
not
be,
fine.
to,
That's not
to
fine.
this point, I would be hard pressed to lift neon in Birmingham for any way, shape, or form.
That's
Internally
okay.
viewed, externally
I'm
viewed.
okay with
because
that.
That's okay if
intention of
that's the
Birmingham
intent.
Was to hold it to a higher standard,
So-
period.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I'm fine with that.
but, now,
That makes it easier.
if Old Blind Dog wants to have an internal one, without having fought our way through what we did at Birmingham to do that, we want to have an internal neon sign, and it's not prohibited like this in Crabapple.
I think it is.
Should be
Isn't
okay.
it? Crabapple prohibited,
Crab
yeah.
apples is the same thing.
Yeah.
Neon is prohibited.
I didn't
There's a
fight-
lot of places
I didn't
in-
fight the Crabapple one.
There's a lot of places in Crabapple that
I have
have
skin in the
neon
Birmingham
signs.
one.
There's a lot of places in Crabapple that have neon signs.
Yeah.
You see it from
Well, the shelf
street.
station doesn't anymore. They took them all down.
And there's businesses that don't even have
I mean,
those signs.
I hear what you're saying, but I mean, I don't care if anybody's got a neon sign inside their building. If I can't see it, why would I care?
Birmingham, I do.
Even if it's in the inside of the building, you can't see
I
it?
have too much skin in the game in Birmingham.
We can't, I mean, but how can we?
I mean, empty
We're
stores
not,
in Birmingham.
let's be practical, you're not going to enforce it.
I mean, signs not visible from the street used to be exempted from this ordinance, but that's no longer the case.
So, anyway, can we move on?
Absolutely.
Sorry. Where are we?
So that was 20,
7?
that was 20, page 26. So my next, anybody have anything before 46? That's my next one.
46 or 40?
40.
Over 40.
I don't have anything for me on 40, but if you guys Oops.
40, 41?
Do you have anything on 40 you want to talk about, or just that's where the next red is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a few things.
Okay.
Just the whole numbering system here has got to be made uniform to all the other sections. You know, the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s and the paragraphs and B definition, city-owned light poles. Does the city actually own light poles? I thought the power
we
company
don't.
owned.
We don't own light poles.
Okay.
Those are Georgia Power.
Georgia Power, whoever.
Utilities.
I think the intention there, Joe, was to differentiate between what would be considered a standard, wooden creosote, so
Telephone.
telephone pole, and like the ability to put more stuff on more light poles throughout. So I think maybe we incorrectly identified it as a city-owned light pole, but we need a definition that allows for that. Just to give you a top line of this, this is obviously done with Crabapple in mind, to identify a business district so that we can have banners to differentiate it from the rest of the city.
Oh, yeah, I understand all that.
So-
I'm just questioning whether we had city-owned light poles. I don't think
So
we do.
the objective was to provide a business-friendly solution to the requests that are out there for those identifiers. But to your point, we misidentified.
What about a mast arm that you wanted to put? You still put the banners on mast arms that are owned by the city, right? We own our mast arms.
We own our mast arms.
Right.
You can put banners on utility poles, but you have to go through Georgia Power to do it. They're the ones who have to install them. They don't let other people install them.
And so has the city of Milton done that with Georgia Power to allow for our own mast arms?
No. Oh, you're talking about the banners.
Banners on
The-
utility poles. I'm a little lost here.
No, it's under banner.
Where? What page?
Oh, we're on
41.
40 and 41.
It's under banner.
No wonder.
Starts out community identification banner.
You want to have it?
Yeah, I do have it. I just can't. That was a different part of the ordinance. On page 41, where are we?
We're on 40. Or was it 41?
41.
41 is
B.
B?
here.
Let's see.
So we need to clarify city-owned light poles.
So I don't think there's going to be light poles, but maybe you mean like mast arms
It could be light poles, you just have.
but they wouldn't be city owned. They'd be light poles
Right.
or mast arms owned by city of mast arms.
Just take city out and add,
Light poles or mast.
right.
MAST,
You
mast
just simply say
arms.
city-owned property in the city right away.
That's true, because they could have signs. You could, kind of stupid to put a banner
I
on
mean,
the
we don't
sign.
usually have signs in the right of way, but, I mean, other than highway signs.
Traffic, yeah.
Traffic signs.
So if we clarified some way to say city-owned mast arms or power company poles, which would imply placement, consistent with
Say
being
utility
close to the
poles.
road.
Utility poles.
And can we call them ID uppercase signs?
We can
instead of
change all those.
E signs?
Yeah.
Or do you want to call them
Actually, they're not
identification
supposed to be-
instead of ID? Is that what
They're
you're
not
saying?
ID signs, they're id signs.
It's, okay.
As opposed to ego signs.
That was a
where we can
question
start-
I understand.
Yeah.
But city-owned is probably,
So we want to
that's
take
probably
that
a
out.
concern. Yeah, you can say on utility poles.
Utility poles, I think.
C2,
Go back to B for a minute first, Joe. It says that the intent is to acknowledge distinctly unique commercial areas in the city. Is it limited to commercial areas?
That was the intent originally.
Okay. So if I think about like historic district signs, they wouldn't fall under this.
Not currently.
Okay.
Nor would Tim's open road neighborhood.
Well, I mean, I'm looking down at 4.
Does he have signs up?
No,
D-
we'd like to find a way to identify Open Road neighborhood.
When I look down at D4, Paul, it says they may be installed at an entry, crossroads, or other focal point of a community or business area. That's why I thought
Oh,
maybe it
I
was
see what
something
you're
broader than that. I didn't know.
Now, these are signs that require permits, right?
Yes.
So you're suggesting that it should be changed to?
I'm not suggesting anything. I wasn't sure what the intent was. I thought it was to do both. I thought it was to define, like when you
Well-
think about Birmingham, it's more than just the commercial area. It's
Yeah, we really wrote this with Crabapple in mind, not saying Crabapple.
okay.
Can anybody apply for that kind of a community identification sign?
As long as they comply with all the parameters.
Community group, property owner.
I mean, I would just take the word commercial out in the definition and just say distinct and unique areas in the city.
It has to be proposed by a substantial number of persons or a group, business associations, blah, blah, blah.
So just strike commercial, George, in unique areas of the city?
Well, that was my thought, because I thought it was broader
Okay
than
with
that.
Yeah, all right.
Would that include like the mixed use areas?
Include like historic preservation areas, historic areas, or
If you think about Crabapple, it's mixed, well, it could be maybe in the future. Well, it is a lot of mixed use.
Well, if we
they're
strike
probably not going to
commercial,
allow you to put them on mast arms.
You
I
don't think
doubt
at the top, like how, doesn't Alpharetta put some of them on their mast arms? On
What,
their-
commercial?
Oh, I
No,
guess
no,
depending
no,
on
the,
what
the
you're
little-
talking about.
I mean, the
Just
little,
talking about
the
sign that
city,
says
yeah.
Birmingham
Art
Crossroads or
show,
something.
the idea was to allow
Taste
for
of
things like
Alpharetta. Sure.
Crabapple has a
I thought we were
holiday
talking
event.
about
They want to
permanent
hang a seasonal
community
banner
identification
throughout
signs
it to
here.
identify.
No, these are
Banners.
banners. These are banners, just like how you have them along the road.
Like in Milton High School.
I'm down into it because it's
But you're still
only.
These things that are
No, yeah, we're.
That, I mean,
think about how
The little baby.
I didn't know they
baby.
were like
Sure,
events.
It's all on
I thought they
these
were to
mast arms
identify
that are holding
areas.
up lights across the
Yeah.
street, these
Okay.
horizontal things, I don't think we're going to put them on that.
But I mean,
Just
when I
you.
said permanent.
I struck everything except the
You're gonna put them up there
Okay.
permanently. They may be permanent banners, but they're permanent, right?
Yeah,
Well,
I
you
think
could
that's-
switch
It's
out
like-
the
it's like
banners,
a
they
now
don't have to
arrived
be
Oh,
one
yeah, I like
side,
that.
but they could have
I've
the
always
framing
liked that.
for it.
But you do have to
And
get.
then
What would you switch out if you're
Power
identifying
company
the area?
install
Maybe
them.
seasonality or something?
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
like,
we
yeah,
will
by
pull out.
seasons.
Well, I never liked it.
Well, yeah,
I wasn't thinking of that.
Bonding required, I like that.
That's why
Christmas
you-
and
you
Crabapple.
could, it could be
Christmas
Christmas
and
and Crabapple, spring and Crabapple,
Yep.
summer and Crabapple, you could swap them out.
Okay, anything else on 40 or 41?
Joe had something.
Yeah, C2C, typo there, but build on community identity should be.
Oh, yeah.
And then down at,
Community identity.
down at D1, A, B, and C, we should call these places by their proper name. So it's Crabapple Crossroads, Birmingham Crossroads, State Route 9 overlay.
Well, that's what they're gonna ask. Do you want to define it as highway, I had the most problem with Highway 9 commercial corridor, is it, you want to just say State Route 9? Just to say the street of State Route 9, or do you want it?
Highway 9, yeah. State Route
Highway,
9.
okay. So it's not because,
Yeah.
See, just
I'll
State Route
take
9.
offense to that.
no, I mean, I don't care, but I think I understood. You didn't want it everywhere wherever the overlay
Yeah,
was.
What do we call it on
Figured I was
Highway
writing that
9?
wrong.
State Route 9, as in the street, as in the state route, I mean, the street.
As opposed to Webb or Cogburn.
Right.
I don't think we need to identify that. People will know where that is.
Well, but I mean, the State Route 9 overlay district encompasses a lot more. I mean, it goes up Cogburn, so you don't want them up there, right?
Right.
So we're just saying State Highway, not.
State Route 9.
Or whatever
State
it's
Route-
called, or
State
New
Route
Old
9.
Milton Parkway, or whatever the council wanted to call it.
Crab.
Ye old Milton.
New old.
Yeah, New
Oh,
Old.
the new
New
old.
The
Old
new,
Milton.
I mean, they've come up
Really?
with
I can comment, SR9 is right.
State Route 9.
Can I ask you a question? I mean, we're trying to write an ordinance here. Why would an ordinance say community identification signs should be considered for the following areas?
You can say allowed,
Can be considered.
or IDs.
I mean, it's like
May.
we're trying to tell people to do it.
It may be considered.
Or the
But they-
following areas are permitted for community ID.
Yeah, it shall be allowed.
Why do you need that at all?
Well, because within Milton right now, those are the areas we thought appropriate to identify this way. It was identifying areas that we thought were unique to our character. We know that, I mean, Highway 9 is looking for an identity. This might help.
So
Birmingham and Crabapple both have identities that we're trying to.
So let me ask you a question. I'm not trying to be difficult, but if I go back to your statement in number, right below purpose, it says this policy is consistent with the sign ordinance and doesn't necessitate any changes to the code regarding, if that's true, why do you need this at all? The city can just go put these things up.
Because it's not the city putting these things up. These are businesses applying for.
The businesses can apply to put them up if it's consistent with, if it doesn't require any change to the ordinance, why do we need this?
Because we were asked to consider it.
And it's not, all the other parts of the ordinance that would apply still apply. This is, kind of over and above.
So is there another way to say that, maybe?
No, I'm just saying if I mean, this is the Buck plan, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
bottom line.
if Buck has the right to come and ask to have these signs put up now under the current ordinance, then we don't need this.
Right now, the current ordinance doesn't allow for these.
So what is it in the current ordinance that prohibits this?
No sign shall be attached to a utility pole.
Because then,
Or the right of way.
because we're specifically saying this doesn't amend the
Well,
ordinance.
then that's incorrect, because it does amend the ordinance.
It's consistent with like the purposes and goals of the sign ordinance, but we can probably take out the necessitate any changes.
So let's just say, reword
We've
that.
used, I'm sorry, we've used, in the section we call it community identification badge. Then I hear somebody talking about retailers could put them up now.
No,
A retailer
no.
can go put up.
It's intended to be like the business
Yeah, it's a
association.
Business
You wouldn't-
association.
You wouldn't
Okay.
apply as an individual business
Okay,
owner to
like
put up
the
a
Chamber
banner.
of Commerce or whatever.
Right.
Excuse me.
And it
It's all-
says that in there.
All I heard was business. I didn't
Yeah,
hear-
no, it can't,
Yeah,
it
okay.
can't be
No, I
Bob's,
clarified it. Gotcha.
Bob's Shell putting up a banner in front of
Gotcha.
his business
Gotcha.
on the utility pole or anywhere
Right.
within, it's intended to provide like a seasonal identification.
I totally agree.
All area and event.
Right, totally agree.
If there was gonna be, a concert at the crossroads,
Mhm.
you would put up
Right.
that doesn't exist, but if there was gonna be one, you would put banners up to support that.
Right.
So I don't mean to go in reverse, but this was a question I had. Under background, in the very beginning, under the start, should we put all that gobbledygook in there? That's not really, it's telling the history of it, but I don't know. Is that relevant?
This is such a new and different kind of sign for us.
You think it needs it? I don't know.
Well,
I mean, at the
I'm
end
always
of the day,
black
it
and
feels
white.
like all you need is number 3. Signs will be allowed within public right of way, and the city will erect them pursuant to the city, blah, blah, blah. Business organizations may request, based on a promise to donate funding necessary.
Well, I'm not gonna, fall on the sword over it, but I think the background part is intended to generate a spirit of this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of necessary when you start considering which ones you're going to accept as sign applications. Like, I don't see that it's harmful in any way. But it is harmful to say the city's going to erect those signs, because we're not going to erect those signs. We will have them erected, but down in paragraph 3, number
Yeah.
3. We might have them erected, but
If Georgia Power were to agree to allow those signs to be erected, would they allow you to retain ownership of them?
yeah, most people keep the signs and the frames, but they don't let you climb on their poles. But yeah, they'll give you the signs back.
So it's just a liability issue.
Yeah.
Is that? The rest of that sentence is with the city
What
will
about
also
Christmas
retain
decorations? Do we have one of those on
These are
poles?
being bought
We-
on behalf of
Other
the city.
cities do.
Christmas
We
decorations?
own the,
Is that
We don't
politically-
have
Okay, so
any.
just
Is it
make
politically
sure we're
correct to
clear.
put Christmas decorations?
They do in
they pay for them
Duluth.
and we own them.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody understood. The intention was for these to be purchased by the, whatever the entity. They're owned, they're provided to the
The
city.
Business Association.
And the city takes ownership of them.
Then I would make that a lot stronger than saying based on a promise to donate.
Yeah, we have to say it at the requester's expense.
I mean, do we really want to own them and have to keep up with them and then provide them again next year?
No, they're still responsible for the maintenance and how they look, and,
But we
They
own them.
you know, they have to be kept in they can't be tattered, they have to be,
Right, but if we, I mean, after we take them
We're gonna
down,
have
if there's
a
a
ton of
spring fling,
Are we?
and then we take them down, we want to be responsible for storing them and being able to find them next spring and return them again. It seems like we'd want to give them back to the people who bought them and let them keep up with them.
I think it's a new line item in the budget. It's a revenue source. Storage fees.
I mean, we don't have any storage
I thought we had
space,
stronger
Paul.
language that
Right.
promised
It should go back to
I thought it
the,
was.
That was,
we
the
required-
chamber,
they
or
were
whoever
required
the
to
heck
post a
sponsored
bond.
it.
They need to be keeping up with them.
Sure.
that is the stronger language.
Well, I thought-
Originally, we didn't have any, but no, we don't,
Yeah,
I don't think we
we
did.
don't.
I thought we did. Hang on a second.
How much of what this process requires is the city willing to do? I mean, with respect to getting Georgia Power approval or whatever it is, the city's not going to actually do the erection themselves. What's the city? The city approves it, okay? But in terms of actually implementing, getting them up on the poles, does the city play a role in that?
I think, yeah, but I mean, we have to pay for that, obviously.
Well, somebody
And the
does.
sign applicant has to pay for that. And so I think what we would do is just simply call Georgia Power, arrange for them to do it, find out what the cost is, and then that
But
cost.
that's my point. The city would manage that process as opposed to the
Yeah, but
Merchants
Georgia,
Association calling
Georgia Power doesn't want the merchants
Yeah,
to
we
do that.
when it's time for them to come down, we notify them. If one's torn up, we notify them.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it. I thought we had stronger language. We talked about having to post a bond and that kind of stuff in order to do that. But we didn't make it in here. But, okay. So I'm sorry, I missed that last part of the
Unless it's
conversation.
How about who's gonna put 'em up?
application requirements.
Who's going to arrange to have them put up?
I mean, I think the city should be the conduit to Georgia Power. This many, this location, this time. And then Georgia Power responds with the cost. We need to collect that cost and then give Georgia Power the go-ahead.
Mhm.
Can't you
But I
just
don't
say
think we
Can't
want-
you just say the city will facilitate the process of installing and maintaining it,
Yeah,
all the
maintenance
costs
is
associated with that will be borne by whoever the association.
Project budget and maintenance agreement.
Okay, so we need to add basically a paragraph that talks about how.
I like the way you said that we will facilitate the installation.
But
Instead
all
of
costs associated
erect-
with construction and maintenance are going to be borne by whoever the requesting party is.
Yeah.
Requester's expense.
The installation and the removal. And these things are not cheap.
No, they're not.
I'm saying add a paragraph.
They're like
that states that the
$75
city
a
will
sign.
facilitate the erection and removal.
And maintenance.
Erection, comma, removal.
Put maintenance in the middle.
Erection.
Chris is going, what the hell are you guys talking about?
What was the rest of that besides that?
Maintenance.
I got that.
That's all stuff.
What
It
was
should be
it?
at the, all the costs associated with it should be at the expense of whoever the requesting party is.
You get that?
Not Chris.
Hey, George, considering we're not going to get through this all tonight, you want to call a
I was gonna say
Cease
stop
at
at
10
Masters.
o'clock?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, why don't we stop when we get the master sign, just a good stopping point.
Yeah.
Before we move off this page, I think it's probably a typo, but section D2, the last part of that sentence is kind of a non sequitur. Community ID signs will help beautify these areas and reflect community recognition and pride, as well as local activities and events. Doesn't connect, so it maybe it's as well as promote local activity and events, or maybe
Yeah.
it's
As
you
well
know
as promote is a
two
good word.
sentences, or maybe it's an and. But
But that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. I thought we said we weren't gonna do that.
You could.
Well, it's
If
a
it's
Milton
in
Roundup,
cooperation
right?
with those associations, why not? Because the businesses are the beneficiaries of it. Why wouldn't they want to cooperate with what do they call the Christmas thing in Crab
Christmas
Apple?
and crab apple.
But let's ask a question. Once they've gone through this process and they've gotten this, what do you call them, standards or whatever the sign holder is, once they're erected and on the pole, do they have to come back through every time they want to change the signs?
Yes.
Whoever the requester is.
Yeah.
I don't think that's clear in here. Maybe it is. Maybe I missed it.
Well,
I mean,
they would remain up. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back and see if we identified it. It's been a while since Angela and I have worked on this before coming to you guys. But it would be intended to be up for whatever period of time until the next season change would bring it, or the next event would bring a change.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
maybe
misunderstood. I
a
thought
fall festival in Crabapple, where there's the antique festival. It may be banners that address the antique festival that's coming October 29th, whatever.
It's the first this year.
That's why he said whatever.
Yeah. I was surprised I was even close that it was October.
I just read this as something different, that's all. I mean, when I got down to removal of signs, signs may be removed by or on behalf of the city by reason of blight, poor maintenance, public safety, welfare that can only occur after the surrounding community has been notified and given an opportunity for input, unless there's a safety hazard. So that doesn't feel like you're putting them up for an event.
That's if this windstorm comes through and tears up these signs.
Yeah, but there's nothing in here that talks about removing them after an event is over, if that's the intent for them being put up.
Yeah, they seem to be permanent. They're not.
Yeah.
They seem to be seasonal or temporary.
We were. I guess maybe we didn't nail it on this attempt, but the objective was to be able to be all-encompassing, where it can be a specific event, like the Crabapple.
Well, I don't know. I think it's a good goal. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying I don't think the way this is written, it covers that.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, I agree with you. Now that we're reading it with the benefit of 10 more people in the room, this is very helpful. I think you're capturing from Angela's and my word, the spirit of what we intended,
Okay.
but it didn't necessarily make it to paper. And
I mean, is that paragraph even necessary?
which one are you on?
On the,
What Curtis was saying.
F1, is it even necessary or not? I mean, clearly if we get a hazard of some sort, we're going to go out there and address it.
Oh.
We're not going to wait for the community to, in a public meeting, to even do that.
Maybe just have, and I think 2 is appropriate. Or maybe strike 1.
2 would cover it all.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Now, do we make any mention of city sanctioned in here? Because generally, these things are always for city sanctioned. I don't know exactly what city sanctioned means, but it does mean that Buck can't advertise the cotton gin.
Yeah, and that was not our intent, to have it be a business-specific ban.
And I shouldn't have said
Just,
Oh, I know, but-
anyway, but that, I
just
mean,
the funding of it.
Well, but it's not just that. I mean, to Tom's point, the whole content review and approval process just doesn't seem to be visible. This read more like a one-time sign that goes up and it stays up as a way to identify the area until they fall apart or what
Yeah,
have you.
no, it was intended to be, to provide the flexibility for all these kinds of things to take place. And we didn't nail that, we'll have to go back and address that before it comes back to the planning commission, but we probably should meet again to.
I mean, you know, to your point, I mean, even if you go to city sanction, you're not going to be able to reserve the right to approve the content.
And you get in trouble with it, like you said, can you sanction a Christmas deal?
True.
Well, that's
As much as I'd like that to be the case,
Yeah.
where you can, but
I mean, we don't want, it seems to me like any sign that we didn't want, we don't want to put up.
And the council has the final say, so.
But it can't be based on content.
Right.
right. To that point, so if the Crabapple wants to have Christmas in Crabapple, that's completely okay, as long as it meets the other parameters. Just like the city is or isn't going to sanction the antique festival. If the community wants to put up an antique festival event banner for a window of whatever, that's okay. They may have, you know, a Halloween event. They may have a spring festival, or like we said, maybe it's a summertime concerts in the square, concerts in Crabapple, and it's a summer-long thing on Friday nights at 8 o'clock. You can put that on those banners.
And we're basically talking about Crabapple.
Well, that
Just
was really the intent.
Downtown Alpharetta. I'm sure their ordinances talk about, you know, they're not gonna do that over on Old Milton somewhere.
So we wrote this with Crabapple.
Crabapple in mind, so I think that.
It's not inappropriate to
I
think
think
about
it's
other
just a little
areas. You could
reworking
think about
is all we
Birmingham,
need
you
here.
could think about Highway 9, as we did identify in here, but it was really penned.
I think it's going to be hard because we're kind of mixing things, because like Alpharetta and Duluth, I think those are all owned by the city, and
City
the
just
signs
puts
are
them
the
up.
signs
Yeah, they're
are the
permanent
cities, and we're
billboards,
kind of
basically.
mixing,
Yep.
you know, the association with, okay, well, if they end up having something that's city sponsored,
it is
it's just getting
something
them to
in
be a
downtown
mess,
Atlanta.
because
It's the tourist.
it either has to be all or
Atlanta
nothing.
I think we should hold this
Data.
section for a little
Roswell
while and
did.
think about it some more.
I'm sorry?
Paul,
It's
to be
got
honest, I'm
complicated.
struggling with
I think it's
how-
the same
how you
way.
can have the city
I would
approve
assume
it
that
with-
they all
without
maintain
It's
their own.
association.
approval.
What's that?
It's in Alpharetta, it's called Data. It's the
Oh, what?
downtown
Downtown
Alpharetta
Oh,
Tourist
Trade
Association, Trade Association. They're the ones that do it.
Right.
But this is a regular sign permit application, isn't it? It doesn't go before city council to
Right.
be approved.
It's for-
It will.
Oh, it will?
It will go to city council to be approved?
Oh, that's
PRB,
right,
City
yeah.
Council.
Oh, well, then I have less concern about it.
It's all there.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's something they just don't like.
Yeah.
And also, I think saying that they'd only consider it if it was from a merchants association or business group also kind of, it's another layer of protection against
Individuals coming in.
individuals.
Yeah, I like that part a lot.
Well, why don't we maybe draw a line here in the fact that it's just about 10 o'clock.
Yeah, let's do that.
Allow us to go back with the benefit of these suggestions before even having to pound the rest of the way through this with another meeting. Allow us to go back and maybe clean up some of that stuff
I
with
think we
those
could-
things in mind.
That you can really simplify it a lot
Yeah.
based on the conversation. I think there's most of this you could take out because you've got it narrowed down.
Joe, would you have any interest in joining us for that discussion, since it really was trying to think about Crabapple? Maybe we'll try to pick a date.
So do you guys want to have another work session before the September meeting? We don't have any other scheduled items for the September Planning Commission, or you want to just keep it as,
We don't have any
Use-
scheduled items except for historic preservation.
well, that's true, except for the other ordinance, yes. But as far as any zoning items.
Yeah.
Well, that's end of September. We certainly can accomplish this by the end of September.
But do you want to meet as a body again to finish up the work session with everything
I
else,
think
or do you
it'd
want
be
to just
good to have a
reserve
work
it?
session to finish this up and not put it on the agenda. What do you think?
Well, it would go on the agenda because it's being advertised. I'm just saying, do you want
I'm
to?
sorry, I was thinking about what Robin was
The
saying.
look on your face would kill. I didn't know.
Not another meeting.
Didn't like that question.
Can we combine again?
Combine.
Combine a work session with a meeting?
Well, that's what I'm just saying. I mean, technically, we've met the rules of the process. Do you want to just try to tackle everything at the planning commission meeting, or do you want to add another meeting, whether it's earlier or another date, or?
We can tackle it, we can try and tackle one meeting, but I think we're going to have to put the ordinance first and the second. If we're going to do that.
I'm just saying it could just be a part of the discussion of the ordinance if you wanted to.
No, I meant the historic preservation ordinance is going to have to be on the agenda before this. We've got
Right.
to deal with
That's
that
fine,
before
yeah.
we deal with this.
That's fine.
But that's fine. Let's
And then just go
combine
into
them.
work session after that.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
We're going to do say, we're going to go into a work
Yeah.
session.
Have to call.
So but the thing is, though, this is also advertised for a public hearing and a decision for that September meeting.
Oh, it is already?
It's already been advertised?
Yeah, well, I advertise everything together. That's the way how it is. I do the CZ.
Oh, no, I know that, but I didn't realize it was already advertised.
Well, it's
Yeah.
okay that it's advertised, you just make a recommendation to defer it.
Okay, if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm just saying, we'll have to have some sort of acknowledgement if you wanted to, if we're still technically working on it.
Well, I might be wrong. I don't anticipate that the discussion of the historic preservation ordinance is going to be as long as it was tonight.
Right.
But we also started at 6 tonight. So the planning commission meeting would start at 7. If we allow ourselves an hour to get through the historic preservation ordinance and start this at 8 o'clock,
We'll be here until 10.
it will be here till 10.
Do you want to call it a work session, or do you want to just have an extension of the planning commission meeting?
I'd rather call it a work session.
Okay. So we'd close the regular meeting,
Right, just do it at the same time.
do the historic, and then defer this, and then go into a work
Right.
session. Okay.
You did a lot of good work on this. Oh, thank you. Clearly thought through a lot.
You did do a good job on it, Paul.
A lot of work.
For clarity, just because maybe it'll help us shorten the sign, again, for clarity, the master signage plan was intended to require that somebody that's putting in a new quote-unquote commercial or mixed-use development is going to submit a plan as a part of that that's going to comply with it.
Yes.
That's the only thing it applies to, right?
Okay. Just before we close the discussion, Tom was kind enough just to thank us, but I'd like to really compliment Angela. She really stuck with this, pounded through it, brought great ideas. Persevered. Brought, whenever we asked, brought points of comparison from places across the country, so that it gave us as a working group some really good stuff to think about. So I really want to thank you for all.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I put him up to that, Andy.
With a little pride beforehand.
That's all right.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed?
One.
Thank you, Robin, for the pizza.
Oh, you're welcome.